Chapter 2672. Just stay here forever. Aren't they a little too strong? What rank are those two personal guards? The independent players present gaped in shock when they saw Yolan's two personal guards clearing the area before the town's main gate. Although the faux saint monsters had been weakened, ordinary Tier 3 personal guards still shouldn't be able to handle them. In fact, even the slightest mistake could result in a Tier 3 personal guard getting killed instantly by the numerous faux saint destroyers. However, with just the help of two personal guards, Yulan had easily repelled the 10,000+ faux saint monsters in front of the main gate. This was simply unbelievable. 2 dark gold guards? When Illusory Word saw the 2 personal guards standing beside Yulan, shock likewise filled her silvery gray eyes. The feat Yolan's 2 personal guards had just accomplished would be difficult even for a Tier 4 summoned creature. The only explanation Illusory Words could think of for this situation was that both personal guards were at the dark gold rank, as only dark gold guards had the power to match Tier 4 mythic monsters. However, in the current God's domain, let alone dark gold guards, even fine gold guards were exceedingly rare, much rarer than even level 100+ epic weapons. Despite being a super first-rate guild, Crimson Emperor had only 6 fine gold guards. As for dark gold guards, Crimson Emperor still had not obtained even a single one. Yet Yulan actually had 2 for herself. What Illusory Words did not know was that only one of Yolan's 2 personal guards was at the dark gold rank. The other was at the fine gold rank. However, the Magic King Craig Midlands' special ability gave both personal guards a significant boost to their combat power. As a result, they currently possessed the strength to match even mythic monsters. Nevertheless, Illusory Words and Unyielding Heart did not relax at this unexpected development. In fact, their expressions further tensed up because the faux saint monsters that got repelled were charging forward once more. Moreover, they were attacking with even greater ferocity this time. In the next moment, several hundred faux saint destroyers let loose an angry bellow before grouping up and executing combination combat techniques on Yolan's group. The might of their attacks rivaled a normal attack of a Tier 4 mythic monster. In the blink of an eye, over 30 such attacks assailed Yulan and her 2 personal guards. As for the faux saint monsters caught inside the rift, they quickly climbed out of it and rejoined the army in attacking Silverwing Town's defensive magic array. Sure enough, just 2 dark gold guards won't be enough to change anything. The strength of the faux saint army simply isn't something current players can hope to resist. When the various superpowers members saw this scene, they sighed ruefully. Dark gold guards were existences that could be obtained only through luck. On a battlefield, a dark gold guard could exhibit combat power far greater than a mythic monster of the same level. However, that was only true against players. Against the faux saint army, the efforts of even 2 dark gold guards were negligible. After all, no matter how powerful a Tier 3 NPC was, they couldn't one-shot Great Lord ranked monsters, much less Grand Lords. The faux saint army could easily pin down Yolan's 2 dark gold guards with just several hundred faux saint destroyers. Even if the 2 dark gold guards eventually annihilated these several hundred destroyers, Silverwing Town would have long since fallen by the time they did so. However, just when the faux saint army was about to commence another round of attacks on Silverwing Town's defensive magic array, silver summoning arrays appeared outside the town's walls, one after another, over 300 in all. Figures then emerged from these summoning arrays. Immediately afterward, fire, ice, lightning, and wind started bombarding the faux saint monsters outside the defensive magic array. Boom, boom, boom. For a time, a plethora of elemental mana inundated the faux saint army, and countless faux saint monsters screamed in agony, their voices echoing throughout Silverwing Town. How is this possible? When the various superpowers members saw the innumerable faux saint monsters outside the town getting sent flying one after another, their fists tightened involuntarily as shock filled their eyes. At this moment, over 300 personal guards stood outside Silverwing Town, every one of them exuding a frightening aura. It was obvious that they were not ordinary personal guards. Aside from the various superpowers members that were spectating the battle through their magic mirrors, the independent players standing atop the town's walls were also gaping in shock, their minds frozen with disbelief. This isn't real, right? Unyielding Heart suspected he was dreaming as he watched the 300+ personal guards fighting outside Silverwing Town. As a vice guild leader of Unyielding Soul, he had seen powerful personal guards before. However, this was definitely the first time he had seen so many personal guards of such high caliber. Although the majority of these newly appeared personal guards were weaker than Yolan's 2 personal guards, they were still much stronger than ordinary personal guards. In fact, even the weakest personal guard present made unyielding heart feel powerless. Meanwhile, after Illusory Words saw the 300-plus personal guards, she could not help shifting her gaze to Shifeng, who stood nearby. Is this the real reason behind his confidence? Every one of these 300-plus personal guards was stronger than a Grand Lord of the same level. At this stage of the game, it was unlikely that even the 5 great super guilds possessed such strength. It was no exaggeration to say that, so long as these 300-plus personal guards were present, Silverwing Town would not fall. While NPCs already possess basic attributes superior to players, after becoming a personal guard, they would gain an additional 10% boost to their basic attributes. Combined with the boost from the town's magic array, these Tier 3 personal guards were far stronger than the town's Tier 3 NPC soldiers. One could even say that Silverwing Town's defenses were currently stronger than even that of main city-ranked NPC cities. After all, the NPC soldiers found inside main city-ranked NPC cities were mostly Tier 2 NPCs. Only a small number were actually Tier 3 NPCs. The only advantage the NPC soldiers of NPC cities had over Zero Wing's personal guards was levels. Meanwhile, although the Faux Saint army had an overwhelming numerical advantage and even possessed more than 100,000 Grand Lords in its ranks, Silverwing Town's magic towers were extraordinary. Now that the Faux Saint monsters couldn't attack the town's defensive magic array effectively due to the interference of Zero Wing's personal guards, they were nothing more than live targets for the magic towers and various war weapons. However, while Silverwing Town's players were rejoicing over the strength Zero Wing had just displayed, the 3 heavily injured Faux Saint Devourers had consumed a few Faux Saint Destroyers and finally recovered their strength. They immediately leaped forward and regrouped with the other 5 Faux Saint Devourers. Good. They've finally recovered. Thousand Eyes grew ecstatic when he saw this scene. Previously, Shifeng had caught them completely off guard and sidelined 3 Faux Saint Devourers before the fight had even begun. As a result, the Faux Saint Devourers couldn't display their true strength. Now that all 8 Faux Saint Devourers had regrouped, they would finally be able to display their true strength. In the next moment, the 8 Faux Saint Devourers exchanged glances. After apparently coming to a tacit agreement, all 8 Devourers hurled their spears at the defensive barrier before them. The 8 spears then converged in mid-flight, their combined power so great that it crumbled the space around them and created a black hole, which transformed everything within a 50-yard radius into a field of nothingness. The power of this attack far exceeded that of the combination attack the 5 Faux Saint Devourers executed before. Tier 5. Illusory Words felt stifled when she looked at the void field the black hole created. The phenomenon the Faux Saint Devourers combination attack had created was known as Void Collapse, a phenomenon limited to Tier 5 attacks. Despite the debuff from Miniature World, the 8 Faux Saint Devourers had actually managed to execute an attack that reached the Tier 5 standard. An attack of such caliber could give even a main city-ranked defensive magic array a run for its money. An ordinary NPC city's defensive magic array would evaporate instantly when struck by this attack. Yet, despite knowing all of this, Illusory Words and Unyielding Soul could only watch as the Faux Saint Devourers combination attack approached Silverwing Town's defensive magic array. After all, Tier 3 players or NPCs could not hope to stop such a powerful attack. The only thing they could do now was pray that Silverwing Town's defensive magic array could survive this attack. However, just when the black hole was about to reach the defensive magic array, a man clad in extravagant robes and holding a pitch-black wooden staff suddenly appeared outside Silverwing Town. The man then casually extended a hand toward the approaching black hole. A gigantic, aquamarine threefold magic array promptly formed before this man and stopped the black hole's advance cold. The man then flicked his extended hand upward, and the threefold magic array deflected the gigantic black hole into the distance. When the black hole touched the ground, it exploded and heavily injured all the Faux Saint monsters within a 50-yard radius. Moreover, these Faux Saint monsters also got trapped inside a void and couldn't escape from it. The attack got blocked? Everyone who saw this scene was stunned. Thousand Eyes, in particular, nearly had his eyes fall out of their sockets. This was a Tier 5 attack. Yet, it had been deflected so easily. However, before anyone could snap out of their daze, the robed man suddenly waved his wooden staff. Dozens of black lightning arcs lashed down from the sky, bombarding the 8 foe Saint Devourers. As if a truck had hit them, all 8 Devourers got embedded into the ground. Their HP bars also lost a visible chunk, their life auras weakening considerably. Everyone was at a loss for words when they saw the 8 6-meter-deep craters that had suddenly formed on the battlefield. The strength that was just displayed could no longer be described as powerful. Practically challenged their worldview. Damn it! How is that Tier 4 NPC so powerful? Thousand Eyes scowled at the robed man hovering in midair. They had done their research on Craig Midlands, the Tier 4 NPC that protected Silverwing Town. This NPC's presence was the reason why Saint's Hand had not dared to approach Silverwing Town all this time. They had only done so after Silverwing had riled up the foe Saint monsters into attacking en masse. However, Craig Midlands' strength was simply monstrous. The Magic King was basically casting Tier 4 curses instantly. To top it all off, he was even double casting Tier 4 curses without incantations. Commander, we can't go on like this. If we continue fighting, I'm afraid that Tier 4 NPC will soon kill all 8 foe Saint Devourers. At that time, the guild leader will definitely fault us. The level 115 Tier 3 ranger standing beside Thousand Eyes advised hurriedly when he saw the foe Saint Devourers becoming heavily injured. In front of the Magic King Craig Midlands, the 8 foe Saint Devourers couldn't mount the slightest resistance. Their HPs were also rapidly decreasing. It was only a matter of time before their HPs hit 0. If not for Craig Midlands having his area of activity limited to Silverwing Town, he might even be able to annihilate the entire foe Saint army single-handedly. Relay my command. Have all of the foe Saint monsters retreat, Thousand Eyes said reluctantly when he saw the foe Saint Devourer's HPs continuing to plummet and the foe Saint army barely landing any attacks on Silverwing Town's defensive magic array. They had lost. Moreover, they had suffered 2 consecutive losses. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. You understood. The Tier 3 Ranger nodded before hurriedly relaying Thousand Eyes' command to the other Saint's Hand members. Following which, Saint's Hand's members took out a strange crystal from their bags and started chanting an incantation. Immediately afterward, the foe Saint monsters attacking Silverwing Town fled to the surroundings as if they had just received a summons. Upon seeing the foe Saint army retreating, Silverwing Town's players sighed in relief. Many players even cheered in celebration. After all, since the initial outbreak of the foe Saint monsters, this was the first time players had achieved a massive victory against them. However, Silverwing, who remained standing above the town's main gate, did not show any excitement on his face. Instead, he shifted his gaze toward a distant forest. Leave? Do you really think Silverwing Town is a place where you can come and go as you wish? Silverwing said. He then took out a summon guard scroll from his bag and unfurled it. Since you've come here already, then just remain here forever. Chapter 2673 Frightening Tier 4. As Silverwing activated his summon guard scroll, the players nearby immediately felt the ambient mana density rise. They also felt the space around them stabilize, the mana fluctuations from outside the town no longer reaching them. Immediately afterward, a middle-aged man clad in luxurious robes and holding a gem-studded staff appeared before Silverwing. Although this middle-aged man did not have an imposing aura, when everyone checked his statistics, they were stupefied. Tier 4. Another Tier 4 NPC. Crap. Just how much strength does Zero Wing have hidden? When the various superpowers members saw Versailles, they cursed out loud. It might have been fine if they hadn't seen the strength of a Tier 4 NPC yet. But after Craig Midlands' performance, they understood just how frightening Tier 4 NPCs were. There was simply no comparison between them and Tier 3 NPCs. A Tier 4 NPC could truly single-handedly turn the tide of a large-scale war. Now it was revealed that Zero Wing possessed 2 Tier 4 NPCs. Moreover, both were magical class NPCs. At this moment, everyone finally understood why Silverwing had killed Thousand Eyes and his team without hesitation back then. If their guilds had 2 Tier 4 NPCs as well, they most likely wouldn't be afraid of the foe Saint monsters either. After all, the gap between Tier 3 and Tier 4 was simply too massive, not one that numbers could make up for. Meanwhile, Silverwing's words enraged the Saint's Hand members hiding inside a forest several thousand yards away from Silverwing Town. What arrogance! That's right. It's just an additional Tier 4 NPC. Black Flame must be dreaming if he thinks he can kill all of us. Let him remain arrogant for now. Let's see how he continues remaining arrogant after the faux saint monsters grow and return after a while. They admitted that they were no match for Tier 4 NPCs. However, Silverwing had to be dreaming if he thought he could kill them all with just 2 Tier 4 NPCs, setting aside the several thousand yards separating them in Silverwing town. Just the fact that the faux saint army stood between them meant Silverwing would take ages to reach them. Expecting to keep them here was simply a fool's dream. Silverwing town's players shared the same opinion. They also thought that Silverwing was boasting. Even though the faux saint army couldn't bring down Silverwing town, it still held the absolute initiative in this war. The faux saint army and Saint's Hands members could stay and leave whenever they wanted. Stopping them with just 2 Tier 4 NPCs was impossible. However, before Saint's Hands members could finish speaking, Versailles waved his staff. Suddenly, the space before him shattered and formed a space-time vortex. Following which, Silverwing and Versailles stepped into the space-time vortex and instantly arrived above the forest where Saint's Hands members were hiding, quietly overlooking these players, who were preparing to retreat. Teleportation? How is this possible? Saint's Hands members were shocked when they saw Silverwing and Versailles above them. Even this is possible? At this moment, aside from Saint's Hands members, the various superpowers members hidden in Silverwing town were stunned as well. A special energy enveloped the entire Orc Empire, preventing the use of all forms of teleportation. In fact, one couldn't even summon flying mounts in the Empire. Players could rely on only carriages and land mounts to travel around, which was common knowledge for players operating within the Empire. This was one of the reasons why Saint's Hands members were not afraid of getting killed. After all, even though Tier 4 NPCs could fly, it would still take them some time to cross a distance of several thousand yards. With the number of Saint's Hands members present being over 1,000, so long as they split up and fled in different directions, it would be impossible for Versailles and Craig Midlands to kill them all. Now, however, Silverwing and Versailles had teleported across a distance of several thousand yards. This was simply unbelievable. Evacuate! Everyone split up and escape. Thousand Eyes yelled with an indescribably grim expression on his face, reacting immediately to Silverwing's arrival. Currently, the entire area around Silverwing town was under the soul annihilation curse. Any player that died within this sealed region would be subject to the curse. Naturally, Saint's Hands members were no exception. In order to ensure the conquest of Silverwing town, not only did Saint's Hands sacrifice 1,000 Tier 2, level 100+ players and 100 Tier 3 experts, but it had also dispatched over 500 Tier 3 experts and over 1,000 Tier 2 experts capable of absorbing the strength of the faux saint destroyers. If every one of these players got killed now, Saint's Hand would suffer unimaginable damage. As soon as Thousand Eyes finished shouting his orders, he took out a Tier 3 flight scroll from his bag. This was an item that granted players the ability to fly for a short time. The movement speed bonus provided was also much greater than that provided by a land mount. This scroll was one of his most important life-saving items. As for the other Saint's Hand members, they promptly snapped out of their daze after hearing Thousand Eyes' reminder and scattered in all directions, fleeing in a panic. If they died now, not only would their death penalties be doubled, but their souls would also be weakened for 15 days. Even Tier 3 experts could not afford such a penalty. After all, in the current God's domain, one would be eliminated from the front lines just for stagnating a few days. What more, 15 days? You still think you can escape even now? Silverwing scoffed, his expression remaining indifferent despite seeing Saint's Hands members fleeing in all directions. As soon as Silverwing finished speaking, a ripple of mana spread out from Versailles' body and instantly enveloped Saint's Hands members, restricting their movements. In the blink of an eye, all the Saint's Hand members found themselves immobilized. How is this possible? What is that NPC? Silverwing town's players were stunned as they took in the scene displayed on the gigantic magic mirror, hovering above the town. Craig Midlands' earlier performance had already been plenty astonishing. However, Versailles was actually outperforming him. Those were over 1,000 expert players. Moreover, many of them were even Tier 3 experts. Nevertheless, Versailles had rendered them immobile with just his mana domain. Is that really just a Tier 4 NPC? Illusory Words' mind reeled as she looked at Versailles. The fact that Craig Midlands could heavily injure 8 foe Saint Devourers was already plenty amazing. Now Versailles was even more terrific. Just by unleashing his mana domain, the NPC had subdued over 1,000 expert players and gained full control over their lives. How could this still be considered a fight? This was basically a one-sided massacre. What Illusory Words and the others did not know was that Versailles wasn't just an ordinary Tier 4 Great Wizard but a Tier 4 Great Wizard who had reached the world creation realm. He could create his own world within his mana domain. Unless one was at the Tier 4 standard, they wouldn't be able to resist his mana domain at all. In the next moment, Versailles swung his staff down at Saint's Hand's members. Immediately afterward, a crimson magic array with a 200-yard radius appeared in midair. It attracted all the fire-type mana nearby, which coalesced into a fireball. As the fireball descended toward the ground, it continuously grew until it was the size of a mountain. Saint's Hand's members and Silverwing Town's players all fell silent as they took in the fireball. For a time it was as if time had frozen for everyone. Black Flame. Just you wait. You cannot stop the foe Saint army. It is only a matter of time before the foe Saint army destroys Zero Wing. Seeing the descent of the gigantic fireball, Thousand Eyes turned to glare at Shurfeng like a maniac. At the same time, he also kept ridiculing Shurfeng for overestimating himself. The foe Saint army will have to be able to grow first in order to do that. Shurfeng retorted nonchalantly to Thousand Eyes' maniacal laughter. As soon as Shurfeng said so, the gigantic fireball landed and exploded. Boom! Endless flames instantly spread across the forest, incinerating every one of Saint's Hand's members. Along with the deaths of Saint's Hand's members, the originally retreating foe Saint army went berserk. With bloodshot eyes, every foe Saint monster on the battlefield charged at Shurfeng. Let's return, Shurfeng said to Versailles. Nodding respectfully in response, Versailles opened another space-time vortex and teleported back to Silverwing Town with Shurfeng. Only after Shurfeng arrived back at Silverwing Town's main gate did the players there snap out of their daze. Everyone then turned to stare at Shurfeng in amazement. He got the job done just like that? Looking at Shurfeng's calm demeanor, it looked as if he had just taken a stroll through his backyard. Those were more than 1,000 expert players. However, Shurfeng had simply trampled over them like they were a bunch of ants. With such strength in his grasp, even if the various superpowers Tier 3 experts banded together, they would be helpless to do anything against Zero Wing. Foe Saint army? It was nothing but a joke. Meanwhile, after Shurfeng returned to Silverwing Town, aside from the 8 heavily injured foe Saint Devourers that were still desperately trying to escape, the other foe Saint monsters resumed attacking Silverwing Town like crazy. However, by this time, everyone understood that Zero Wing would definitely annihilate the foe Saint army in the end. After all, even if the foe Saint Devourers could escape the Magic King, they wouldn't be able to escape Versailles. As for the other foe Saint monsters, they were merely live targets for Silverwing Town's magic towers and Zero Wing's personal guards. Fire Dragon Empire, Flame Dragon City, Fire Dragon Auction House. Currently, the upper echelons of nearly 20 superpowers had assembled inside the Fire Dragon Auction House. This was a gathering of unprecedented scale in the entire Fire Dragon Empire. At this moment, the Tier 3 experts of these superpowers had also surrounded the auction house, preventing unaffiliated players from entering the building. However, despite being barred entry, a huge crowd of players, including the upper echelons of first-rate guilds and top adventurer teams, still waited outside the building. Every one of these players was very concerned about the results of the alliance discussion this time. After all, this alliance discussion could very well change the power structure of the entire Eastern continent. If they did not pay attention to the results of this meeting, they might end up getting eliminated from God's domain without knowing the reason. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Meanwhile, inside the top-floor meeting room of the Fire Dragon Auction House, over 100 Tier 3 peak experts or above were currently seated at a round table. The combined aura these experts released would deter even domain realm experts from messing around. Currently, however, all of these experts were looking at the woman seated at the head of the table with respectful looks on their faces. Whitefeather, who stood behind the chairwoman, leaned forward and said quietly, "Vice Guild Leader, the various superpowers upper echelons are all here. In response, Cold Shadow nodded and said, "All right, let's begin." Chapter 2674. Relayed message. As soon as Cold Shadow indicated to start the meeting inside the large and spacious meeting room, White Feather stepped forward and swept her gaze across everyone present. Although White Feather did not say anything, everyone present promptly quieted down and focused their gazes on her, as they all understood that the alliance discussions were finally going to begin. Firstly, let me thank everyone on behalf of Mythology for attending the Faux Saint Alliance discussion. Although the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion's invitees are unable to attend the meeting this time, due to special circumstances, the pavilion has sent a representative capable of making decisions for the guild. I believe it will not affect the implementation of the meeting results, so please rest assured, everyone, White Feather said from beside Cold Shadow. Upon hearing White Feather's words, the various superpowers upper echelons present reflexively shifted their gazes to the white-clad elderly man representing the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion. At this point, the sudden disappearance of the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion's Great Pavilion Master and 2 Pavilion Masters was already common knowledge among the superpowers. However, everyone had always thought that this was due to an internal dispute between the 2 Pavilion Masters, and that they would definitely show up for today's meeting. Yet, to everyone's surprise, despite today's meeting being of utmost importance to the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion's continued existence, be it the pavilion's Great Pavilion Master or the 2 Pavilion Masters, none of them had shown up. Only a few guild elders and 1 grand elder represented the pavilion at today's meeting. This situation inevitably piqued everyone's curiosity as to what had actually happened to the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion. Since everyone is here, I won't waste words with you all. Let's address today's main topic, White Feather said as she swept her gaze across the people before her once more. She then clapped her hands twice. A holographic map of the entire eastern continent appeared in the center of the round table. Although many areas remained blacked out as unknown territory, the map included every location known by players at this stage of the game. In fact, it even displayed some level 120 to level 140 neutral maps, places that most of the superpowers attending this meeting lacked the ability to visit in great detail. What a detailed map! For a time, the various representatives present gasped over the contents of the map. Detailed maps of specific parts of God's domain might not be rare in God's domain, but compiling all of them into one continental map was not an easy task. This was especially true for level 100+ neutral maps and forbidden lands. The various powers considered the information for these maps top secret, and rarely shared it with others. Now, however, Mythology had actually shared its valuable map information with the superpowers present without hesitation. This was an incredibly generous gesture. However, after everyone spent some time studying the map, they noticed a few surprising points. Certain locations on the map were marked in dull gray and white. These locations were none other than the territories of God's domain's various NPC dark forces, and the recently appeared Faux Saint monsters. Mythology's intel on the territories of the Eastern Continent's NPC dark forces mostly matched up with what the other superpowers had, and these NPC dark forces were mainly based in level 100+ neutral maps. However, the Faux Saint monsters' territory marked on Mythology's map made everyone present doubt their eyes. How did the Faux Saint monsters' territory grow so large? A gray-clad assassin wearing Shadowless Empire's guild emblem exclaimed. According to their information, the Faux Saint monsters' territory should encompass only the Purple Thorns Kingdom, Star Moon Kingdom, and the Orc Empire. However, according to Mythology's map, the Faux Saint monsters were about to extend their reach into the 14 other neighboring kingdoms, as well as the Black Dragon Empire and Dark Knight Empire already. This was incredible. Is this really the Faux Saint monsters' territory? Is there some kind of mistake? Besides Shadowless Empire's vice guild leader, the representatives of the Super Guild's Pride Empire, Sky Dragon House, Sacred Temple and Nine Heavens Pavilion, as well as the representatives of the other superpowers, were stupefied by Mythology's map. Although they had long known that the Faux Saint monsters were not easy opponents and would definitely pose a huge problem for the Eastern Continent, they hadn't anticipated that the monsters' development speed would be so swift. Everyone need not doubt the validity of this map. It is the result of exchanging information with multiple super guilds. Moreover, this information is just a day old, Cold Shadow said. I know many of you present find this hard to believe, But this is reality. This is also one of the reasons why I invited everyone present to today's meeting. The vice guild leaders of the 4 other super guilds present nodded, acknowledging that their respective guilds had indeed traded information with mythology. A day old? Doesn't that mean that the faux Saint Monster's territory is even larger now? A level 116 female druid from the Moon God's Realm's Dark Pursuit asked. That's right. With their development speed, they should have come into contact with the borders of these kingdoms and empires already, Cold Shadow replied, nodding. I'm afraid it won't be long before their territory spreads to nearly half of the entire eastern continent. At that time, everyone present will not be able to avoid coming into contact with faux Saint Monsters. The representatives that remained relatively relaxed before could not help growing nervous at Cold Shadow's words. Originally, they had come to this meeting merely to see if there were any benefits to be had. After all, they all believed that this meeting targeted Silverwing. In their opinions, the matter of forming an alliance to resist the faux Saint Monsters was just an excuse. Vice Guild Leader Shadow, since you've gathered us here, does that mean you have a plan to prevent this situation from occurring? The white-clad elder from the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion asked with a grim expression. The sudden disappearance of the Great Pavilion Master, and the 2 Pavilion Masters had already dealt a significant blow to the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion. Now there was also the threat of the faux Saint Monsters. This development was simply a nightmare for the pavilion. He had seen how the faux Saint Monsters destroyed Star Moon Kingdom's border cities. Although the Black Dragon Empire was strong, the faux Saint Monsters were growing stronger by the day. After they gobbled up Star Moon Kingdom, it was only a matter of time before they did the same to the Black Dragon Empire. Upon hearing the white-clad elder's words, the other representatives present promptly turned to Cold Shadow. They all wished to know the reason why Cold Shadow had gathered them today. Of course. Otherwise, I wouldn't have invited everyone to come, Cold Shadow replied, nodding. Her lips curling up, she continued. I believe everyone already knows by now how powerful the faux Saint Monsters are. It is simply impossible for us to stop these monsters from spreading their influence. Hence, before today's meeting, I formed a partnership with Saint's Hand's guild leader. A partnership? Everyone perked up their ears at Cold Shadow's words. The guild known as Saint's Hand was not foreign to those present. They also knew very clearly that Saint's Hand possessed tools that prevented the faux Saint Monsters from attacking players. In fact, the guild even had a tool that could surely prevent the faux Saint Monsters from attacking guild towns and cities. However, until this day, Saint's Hand had never shown any willingness to partner with other powers. The most it was willing to do was sell some of these tools at exorbitant prices. The conditions of the partnership are very simple. All we need to do is collaborate to take down Stone Forest City. At that time, not only will Saint's Hand sell us a stronghold barrier that can prevent the faux Saint Monsters from attacking the towns and cities the barrier is set up in, but everyone present will also get some of Stone Forest City's shares as well as a number of residential slots in the Freedom Hotel, Cold Shadow said, smiling. When Cold Shadow finished speaking, the eyes of the various representatives present glistened. Even if Cold Shadow had not mentioned partnering to take down Stone Forest City, they already had plans to do so. After all, Stone Forest City was simply too amazing. What made Stone Forest City amazing wasn't its location in a level 100 neutral map, but the city's Freedom Hotel. After experiencing the Freedom Hotel's effects, practically every expert belonging to the various superpowers wished to have their own room there. That way, they would be able to not only accumulate the double EXP buff rapidly, but also expel much more quickly the foreign energies corroding their bodies. Having a room of their own would drastically increase their leveling speed. Moreover, depending on the quality of the room one rented in the Freedom Hotel, one could even train in the Freedom Hotel's excellent environment and achieve extraordinary results. At this point, the main reason why Stone Forest City was able to continue flourishing in Silverwing's hands was the Freedom Hotel. Otherwise, the city would have long since fallen due to Starlink and the various superpowers' constant harassment. If they could secure Stone Forest City for themselves, not only would they have a better assurance against the faux Saint Monsters, but they would even gain residential slots in the Freedom Hotel. This was definitely killing 2 birds with 1 stone. However, taking Stone Forest City down won't be easy. Aside from the NPC Night Division, quite a few superpowers have partnered with Silverwing. Even with an alliance, I'm afraid capturing the city will be difficult. That's right. The flying ships are also constantly patrolling around Stone Forest City. If it really comes down to a fight, I'm afraid the number of Tier 3 experts we have is far from enough to capture the city. The Dark World's failed invasion has thoroughly proven this point. Moreover, I heard that Black Flame has already returned. His personal strength is extraordinary. Although many of the representatives present showed interest in Cold Shadow's plan, some representatives also shook their heads and expressed their worries. The fact that the various superpowers desired Stone Forest City was old news. However, it was precisely because they were incapable of dealing with Zero Wing's NPC Night Division that they had chosen to whittle down Zero Wing's economy in secret instead of taking direct action. Although Cold Shadow had brought this matter out into the open, the crux of the problem remained unchanged. Black Flame's return is indeed a problem, but he already has problems protecting himself. I believe you all should know about this. Moreover, aside from us, the Dark World's various powers will take action as well. After all, their hatred for Zero Wing has never subsided. They merely lack the opportunity to take action. When the time comes, the Dark World side will attack the teleportation gate in full force to lure Zero Wing's Night Division away, while our side will attack Stone Forest City. Even if the Night Division is powerful, it can't defend two locations simultaneously, Cold Shadow said. Moreover, Saint's Hand will take part in the attack. It will even bring some faux Saint monsters to help. Those NPC knights might be powerful when going up against players, but their performance will drop when going up against the faux Saint monsters. At Cold Shadow's mention of the faux Saint monsters, the various representatives present sucked in a deep breath. By this time, the strength of the faux Saint monsters had already been deeply ingrained into their hearts. These monsters simply weren't opponents players could handle. If an army of them attacked, even NPC cities would fall, let alone a measly guild city. Moreover, according to the intel they obtained, mythic-ranked faux Saint Devourers had already appeared in the ranks of faux Saint monsters. Once these faux Saint Devourers reached a certain number, even main city-ranked NPC cities were likely to fall. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Right then, however, the various representatives present suddenly received message notifications, one after another, the synchrony of these messages making their arrival seem pre-planned. Following which, the originally excited venue suddenly fell deathly silent. Feather, what happened? When Cold Shadow saw everyone sinking into a daze, she automatically turned to White Feather for the reason for everyone's reactions. Just what kind of information did everyone receive that stunned them so much? They lost. The faux Saint army and Saint's Hand's forces that went to attack Silverwing town lost. White Feather exclaimed, her eyes filled with shock and horror as she looked at Cold Shadow. Moreover, it was a tragic defeat. Every faux Saint monster and Saint's Hand member that went to Silverwing town died. Chapter 2675 Change in times on the Eastern Continent. After White Feather finished speaking, the heavy atmosphere inside the meeting room grew even heavier. For a moment, it felt as if time inside the room had stopped as the room became indescribably silent. They lost? Moreover, all of them got killed? How is that possible? After snapping out of her shock, Cold Shadow felt that White Feather was kidding her. Either that or there was a mistake in the information reported. The faux Saint army and Saint's Hand's failure to destroy Silverwing town was already plenty unbelievable. Now, however, she was actually being told that not only did the faux Saint army and Saint's Hand suffer defeat, but Zero Wing had even annihilated them. She would rather believe that Zero Wing had instantly destroyed a superpower than this nonsense. After all, over 4 million faux Saint monsters had marched on Silverwing town. Moreover, the weakest monsters in the army were Great Lord-ranked faux Saint saboteurs. Even a 6-man party led by a Tier 3 expert would need around 10 minutes just to kill one of them. Even if every faux Saint monster stood still and allowed Silverwing town's players to wail away at them, it would take ages for the players to annihilate the faux Saint monsters. Meanwhile, it had been at most 2 hours since the faux Saint army launched its attack on Silverwing town. How could Zero Wing possibly annihilate the army in such a short time? Besides, the Grand Lord-ranked faux Saint destroyers were monsters that would flee from battle once their high HP fell to a certain level. With more than 100,000 faux Saint destroyers fleeing in multiple directions, the players in Silverwing town couldn't hunt down every one of them, even if the number of players was multiplied tenfold. Nevertheless, Whitefeather and the various representatives present all revealed a bitter smile filled with self-ridicule upon hearing Cold Shadow's question. They truly wished that the information their subordinates had just relayed to them was false. However, the report they received contained not just words, but numerous images and videos as well. In fact, the report was so detailed that they could not help but wonder if they were dreaming. Normally, even when relaying urgent information, their subordinates would send them only a few paragraphs of text. Now, however, their subordinates were behaving like diligent, hot-blooded youths. Just the videos they included in the report numbered over a dozen. There were even narrative texts accompanying each video, as if their subordinates were afraid that they would not understand the events recorded. In response to Cold Shadow's question, Whitefeather did not bother wasting words on an explanation. Instead, she forwarded the report her subordinate sent her to Cold Shadow. When Cold Shadow finished looking through Whitefeather's report, her entire person fell into a daze, her reaction not much better than Whitefeather's and the others. An impenetrable defensive magic array. Over 300 personal guards capable of overwhelming the foe Saint monsters. A Tier 4 NPC guard capable of heavily injuring 8 foe Saint Devourers in a single hit. A Tier 4 personal guard capable of immobilizing and vaporizing over 1,000 expert players with just a thought. Each piece of information was practically more exaggerated and unbelievable than the one before. If not for Cold Shadow being certain that Saint's hand aimed to annihilate Zero-Wing, and knowing that the foe Saint army marching to Silverwing town was real, she would have thought that Saint's hand had joined hands with Zero-Wing to toy with her. Meanwhile, aside from the superpowers attending the Alliance discussion, the various powers all over the Eastern continent were also in an uproar. So this is Zero-Wing's true strength? Amazing! It's no wonder Black Flame thought nothing of Thousand Eyes' threat and even killed him directly. With such strength, who could possibly take down Silverwing town? A Tier 4 personal guard? It seems times are going to change on the Eastern continent. The various powers of God's domain had never thought that the foe Saint army would fail to destroy Silverwing town, much less suffer such an overwhelming defeat. However, rather than the foe Saint army's defeat, what truly shocked the various powers was the strength of Tier 4 NPCs, or rather their gross misjudgment of the strength of Tier 4 NPCs previously. Although they were in awe of Tier 4 NPCs, it was only at the level of the awe they felt for mythic monsters. Nowadays, however, the number of Tier 3 experts in God's domain was on a constant uptick. The number of Tier 3 skills and spells Tier 3 experts learned had also increased substantially. Tier 3 experts with fully unlocked mana bodies were also appearing one after another. Hence, expert players that possess combat power approaching the Tier 4 standard were no longer as rare as before. In fact, killing level 100 plus mythic monsters had already become a normal occurrence for players in the current God's domain. Hence, no one felt much awe toward Tier 4 NPCs anymore. They all thought that Tier 4 NPCs were no longer anything special. At most, they were just slightly stronger than mythic monsters and could play a relatively significant role only in small-scale battles, and not affect the big picture at all. However, after watching Craig Midlands' and Versailles' performances, the various powers realized that they had been sorely mistaken. Let alone being capable of affecting the big picture of God's domain, everything below Tier 4 was basically an ant before Tier 4 NPCs. The number of Tier 3 players or monsters that Tier 4 NPCs had to face did not matter. They could easily annihilate their opponents with a single wave of their hands. Previously, many of the Eastern Continent's superpowers had felt gleeful over the fact that they had surpassed Zero-Wing in the number of Tier 3 experts they possessed. In fact, their number of Tier 3 experts had grown so large that even Tier 3 personal guards would not be capable of stopping them. This was also why many superpowers had started having designs on Zero-Wing's Stone Forest City. However, after Craig Midlands' and Versailles' performances, these superpowers realized that their thoughts were laughable. Zero-Wing's main force had disappeared? Zero-Wing was no longer as strong as before? Zero-Wing was merely relying on its past prestige to survive? It was only a matter of time before the various superpowers devoured Zero-Wing completely? What a bunch of nonsense. Every one of these assumptions was outrageously mistaken. Meanwhile, inside the Dark World, a commotion was also sweeping through the entire Otherworld due to the foe Saint army's defeat. Amazing! After this blow, the powers that are secretly taking action in the Dark World will have to think twice. Blue Rainbow balled her fists in excitement when she got to the end of her subordinate's report. Previously, although Dark Rhapsody had managed to develop rapidly due to its partnership with Zero Wing, the pressure the Dark World's various powers placed on Dark Rhapsody had also risen steadily. As a result, safeguarding the Dark World's teleportation gate became increasingly difficult. To make matters worse, World Domination had also pulled off a huge comeback, using some unknown method to raise the levels and strength of its guild members rapidly. It had also secretly allied with many of the Dark World's powers and incessantly ambushed Dark Rhapsody's members, inflicting significant losses on Dark Rhapsody. As a result, not only did Dark Rhapsody's influence in the Dark World not increase, but it was even decreasing with each passing day. Recently, the various rumors of Zero Wing's eventual downfall had even swayed the opinions of part of Dark Rhapsody's upper echelon, which in turn shattered the guild's unity. Those senior members all thought that Dark Rhapsody would only be doomed if it continued partnering with Zero Wing, and had suggested that the guild partner with World Domination instead. However, with the appearance of a Tier 4 personal guard in Zero Wing, who would dare continue opposing Dark Rhapsody's partnership with Zero Wing? Meanwhile, during the time Zero Wing's various partners were rejoicing, the war at Silverwing Town had also entered its final phase. With the Faux Saint army annihilated, thousands of Zero Wing members were currently helping the various independent players tally their contribution in the war with excited expressions on their faces. Although the Faux Saint monsters did not drop any loot, they granted a lot of EXP, easily 3 or 4 times more than ordinary monsters of the same rank and level. This was also one of the reasons why many players still chose to operate in the Faux Saint monsters' territory instead of heading for safer locations. Operating within the Faux Saint monsters' territory might be very dangerous, but with how much EXP these monsters granted, so long as one did not die, one's leveling speed would be at least 2 times faster than if one grinded elsewhere. After Silverwing Town successfully annihilated the Faux Saint army without sustaining any casualties, the EXP everyone got was through the roof. The Zero Wing members that had participated in this war had leveled up once on average, with the lower-leveled members even gaining 2 levels through this war. Their leveling speed was simply unprecedented. At the same time, Silverwing Town's victory induced the players and adventurer teams operating in the other guild towns established within the Orc Empire to make their way to Silverwing Town, all wishing to develop there. In fact, there were many Tier 3 experts seeking to join Zero Wing as well. This situation overjoyed Yulan and Melancholic Smile. Currently, what Zero Wing lacked the most were Tier 3 experts. Due to Zero Wing's main force members' absence and the fact that most level 100+ dungeons had a Tier 3 requirement for entry, Zero Wing had a very difficult time obtaining the rare materials available, only in level 100+ dungeons. The guild could only purchase and trade for these materials. However, the various powers all considered these materials strategic resources and rarely ever chose to sell them. This, in turn, limited Zero Wing's production of level 100+ weapons and equipment. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Meanwhile, as Silverwing Town's players were celebrating their victory, Shifeng made his way back to Zero Wing's residence. He planned to log out of the game and get some rest. Previously, because he had killed another 8 Faux Saint Devourers, he had gained another 8 soul marks. Although none of these soul marks contained a soul array like before, they had refreshed his brain and triggered extraordinary activity. This definitely wasn't normal for him, as he had been online for over 10 days already. He needed to log off to rest and inspect his body. While waiting for the 30-second logout process to complete, Shifeng suddenly received a call request from Yulan. Guild leader Mythology's Feng Shihan suddenly visited the main headquarters. Our people couldn't stop her and her entourage from entering the building at all. They're currently in the main lobby, and she says she wants to have a discussion with you. She says it is related to Zero Wing's future. Do you wish to meet her? Yulan asked anxiously. Looking for me? Shifeng was a little surprised by Yulan's words. Smiling, he continued, this is interesting. Have someone lead them to the top floor reception room. I'll head over immediately. Chapter 2676, Potential Elevated? Zero Wing's main headquarters, Shifeng's room. Along with the whoosh of high-pressure air escaping, the tightly shut lid of Shifeng's gaming cabin opened up. At the same time, the strip of warning lights along the edges of the cabin lit up crimson. Sure enough, When Shifeng climbed out of the gaming cabin and saw the cabin's console interface listing all sorts of warnings, he could not help a sigh of relief. Although he had anticipated that his abnormal brain activity came at a price of extraordinary energy consumption, he never thought that the consumption rate would increase to such an extent. Before the war with the Faux Saint Army began, his cabin's nutrient solution reserve and emergency energy solution reserves had still been at 30% capacity. Now, however, these solution reserves were dry. In preparation for emergencies, Shifeng had specifically outfitted his virtual gaming cabin with a special modification. Unlike the standard model, his cabin had an additional compartment that stored 20 bottles of energy solution, the effects of which rivaled those of A-rank nutrient fluids. These energy solutions would be used only when the normal nutrient solution couldn't sufficiently quickly provide him with the energy his body required. He had never thought that both his cabin's nutrient solution and emergency energy solution would be depleted. Not dwelling on the matter, Shifeng promptly made his way to the nearby fridge and consumed a life potion, just in case. During the battle at Silverwing town, he had relied on Versailles to kill all 8 Faux Saint Devourers. When the soul marks of all 8 Devourers entered him, his mind had entered a transcendent state. For a moment he even felt omnipotent. It was as if his thought processes had shifted into overdrive. If other players encountered such a situation, they would definitely consider it a stroke of luck. However, Shifeng, with over a decade of experience playing God's domain, understood very clearly the precondition for enjoying this fortuitous opportunity: sufficient nutrients and energy to power his body. If he did not meet this condition, he might even lose his life because of this opportunity. After consuming the life potion, the slight burning and ache in his brain started to ease gradually, the incessant stinging he felt fading. However, as time passed, his recovery rate was also clearly slowing down. It was obvious that just one life potion wouldn't let him recover all of the energy he had exhausted. The life potion had resolved only the immediate dangers to his body. Although he currently looked fine, in reality, both his mind and body were still starving. Sure enough, not having enough S-rank nutrient fluids and life potions is very troublesome. Shifeng rubbed his temple in frustration. Although he had resolved his current problems, if he continued developing at this rate, the burden on his body would keep increasing. And to cope with this burden, he would need more S-rank nutrient fluids or life potions. Moreover, due to the incident this time, many of Zero Wing's members would most likely require the help of S-rank nutrient fluids or even life potions to recover as well. If Zero Wing could not acquire enough of these energy solutions, the guild would have its development speed restricted and its growth potential reduced. For the current Zero Wing, credits were no longer a problem. After all, Zero Wing had partnered with quite a few superpowers. The guild could exchange coins or other in-game resources for credits with these superpowers. This was also the reason why Zero Wing did not face any financial problems now. However, S-rank nutrient fluids and life potions were a different story. As far as Shifeng knew, only a limited number of S-rank nutrient fluids were sold every year, and the various international corporations monopolized over 80% of these S-rank nutrient fluids. Only a small number was actually sold to the public. This was why S-rank nutrient fluids sold at astronomical prices and were incredibly difficult to obtain. Shifeng did not feel particularly surprised by this situation. After all, the S-rank nutrient fluid did not just possess powerful recovery abilities. It could also help maintain a person's youth to a certain extent. Meanwhile, youth was priceless. As for the life potion, it was a new solution the Green God Company recently created. Not only was its value far above that of the S-rank nutrient fluid, but it was also much rarer. Despite S-rank nutrient fluid being rare, it was still possible for people without connections like Shifeng to obtain some from time to time. However, the life potion was not available to the public at all. Previously, the fact that he was able to obtain some was already plenty fortunate. During the time Shifeng was having a headache over the rarity of S-rank nutrient fluids and life potions, a knock came from his door. "Instructor Shi, they're in the top-floor reception room already," Liang Jing said through the door. "All right, I'll head over now," Shifeng answered. After tidying himself, he promptly left with Liang Jing and headed to the building's top-floor reception room. Top-floor reception room. Currently, a man and 2 women were present inside the luxurious reception room that overlooked half of Fenglin City. Meanwhile, leading the group was none other than Cold Shadow, a vice-guild leader of mythology. At the same time, she was also one of the outstanding talents among the Fong family's younger generation, Fong Shihan. At this moment, however, Fong Shihan did not seem to be here as a representative of the Fong family, as the man and woman standing beside her were not members of the Fong family. Although one would not be able to tell through external appearances alone, the woman standing beside Fong Shihan was the female guardian knight White Feather. While White Feather's appearance in the real world was significantly different from her appearance in God's domain, the aura she exuded was exactly the same. However, what was most surprising was that White Feather was actually stronger in the real world than in God's domain. Although she was not a grandmaster martial artist, her aura trumped that of an actual grandmaster. If placed within one of the country's top dojos or training centers, she would definitely be regarded as an absolute prodigy, yet she was actually unknown in the fighting industry for some reason. As for the man standing beside Fong Shihan, he was none other than Matt, who had previously visited the Heaven's Rumble training center with Fong Shihan. Based on his aura, he was much stronger than before. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. When Shifeng entered the room, the gazes of the trio promptly fell on him. Fong Shihan, in particular, looked at Shifeng as if she was appraising an item rather than a person. "Miss Fong, long time no see. May I know what business you have with me to seek me out so urgently?" Shifeng asked, going straight to the point. Previously, after he had displayed his strength as a grandmaster martial artist and suppressed Matt, both the Fong family and mythology had dropped all contact with Zero Wing in the real world. However, he also understood that this period of peace merely meant that his enemies were secretly making preparations for the next attack. After all, even an expert like Matt was merely an excellent disciple of mythology, not one of the guild's big shots or top-ranking experts. Otherwise, Matt wouldn't have listened to Fong Shihan's orders so obediently. "Instructor Shi, no, I suppose I should address you as guild leader Black Flame. May I know if I am correct?" Fong Shihan asked, a faint smile appearing on her face as she gazed at Shifeng. Chapter 2677 Identity Exposed? When Fong Shihan finished speaking, a moment of silence enveloped the entire room. Black Flame. He's that Black Flame? Standing behind Fong Shihan, Matt and White Feather gaped at Shifeng in incredulity. By this time, there was most likely nobody among the superpowers that did not know the name Black Flame. In fact, this name was even feared among them. After all, Black Flame's individual strength was simply too astonishing. He had relied on his own strength to develop Zero Wing to its current scale, a feat that had already become a legend on the Eastern continent, which made him an existence that countless players looked up to and worshipped. However, Black Flame's identity was incredibly mysterious. Even now, nobody knew Black Flame's true identity in the real world. Many powers and players suspected that Black Flame possessed an incredibly powerful origin, and that the power behind him was even more mysterious. Some people even believed that, despite Black Flame's in-game appearance, his actual age exceeded 35 already. He definitely wasn't as young as he looked in the game. After all, it was possible for players to adjust their appearances when creating their game characters in God's domain. It wasn't strange for someone to look a decade or two younger. However, Fong Shihan was saying that Shifeng, someone who was still in his early 20s, was the legendary guild leader of Zero Wing Black Flame. This was incredible. Meanwhile, when Liang Jing beside Shifeng heard Fong Shihan's words, she couldn't help tensing up inwardly. Shifeng's true identity was a core secret of Zero Wing that only the guild's core upper echelon knew. She was apprised of this secret only because her responsibilities required her to know about it. Zero Wing was able to develop to its current state, due largely to the mystery behind Black Flame's identity. Many superpowers had guessed that Black Flame actually had a powerful backer. Otherwise, he couldn't have become so powerful. However, as the various superpowers were unable to uncover any information regarding Black Flame's real identity, no matter what, they had never dared to take any drastic actions against Zero Wing. Now that Fong Shihan had discovered Shifeng's identity as Black Flame, the consequences for Zero Wing would be unimaginable. However, Liang Jing quickly suppressed the urge to refute Fong Shihan's words. She knew very clearly that if she were to show any signs of panic or rebuttal now, she would only confirm Fong Shihan's deduction. The only thing she could do now was remain silent and let Shifeng handle the problem. As Matt and Whitefeather stared at Shifeng sighed. That's right. Miss Fong is indeed correct. I am Zero Wing's guild leader Black Flame, Shifeng said, nodding. Upon hearing Shifeng's acknowledgement, both Matt and Whitefeather goggled involuntarily, immense shock flooding their hearts. They never dreamed that Fong Shihan's deduction was actually correct. Liang Jing also could not help growing anxious in this situation. She hadn't thought that Shifeng would come clean without hesitation. This was simply insane. You're actually not even going to try to refute me? Fong Shihan was a little surprised at Shifeng's response. In her opinion, Black Flame's identity was pivotal to Zero Wing's development. The situation inside God's domain aside, just the various superpowers and corporations keeping a close eye on Zero Wing in the real world would be more than enough to land the guild in serious trouble. After all, with Black Flame's identity exposed, the various superpowers and corporations would no longer fear Zero Wing. I doubt it would matter even if I tried to refute you. After all, I suddenly got stuck inside my virtual gaming cabin and lost contact with the outside world for so many days. With you constantly probing the situation inside Zero Wing's main headquarters, it'd be difficult for me to avoid suspicion, Shifeng said. Ever since he left the space-time maze, he had a feeling that his identity as Black Flame had already been exposed. After all, many of Zero Wing's matters in the real world required his, or to be precise, Shifeng's approval and input to proceed. Be it in God's domain or the real world, Zero Wing's management had fallen into a state where it lacked a unified command with both Shifeng and Black Flame unavailable. It was very easy for others to suspect his identity in such a situation. As expected of guild leader Black Flame, you were able to guess immediately why I suspected you to be Black Flame, Fong Shihan said, smiling. Truthfully, if not for the unexpected incident this time, I would have difficulty confirming your Black Flame. After all, who would ever think that an unknown young man who just graduated from university recently and never received the standardized training of a superpower is actually an expert ranked within the top 30 of the God's Domain experts list? In God's Domain, any expert capable of ranking within the top 30 of the God's Domain experts list either came from a superpower or was an expert that had mingled in the virtual gaming world for several decades already. As for the young experts that were currently shining in God's domain, while their talent was part of the reason why they had managed to achieve their current success, a larger part of the reason was their powerful backers. Otherwise, how would they obtain the large amount of resources and training they needed to grow? However, what about Shifeng? Despite his youth and lack of backing, he had managed to climb his way into the top 30 of the God's Domain experts list. In fact, he might have entered the top 10 already. Who could possibly believe this? Matt and Whitefeather fell into deep thought, pondering this situation. If not for their great trust in Fong Shihan and their knowledge of Fong Shihan's personality, and how she wouldn't do anything that was unlikely to succeed, they wouldn't have dared believe that Shifeng was actually Black Flame. This was especially true for Whitefeather, who had personally witnessed Black Flame's strength before. After watching Black Flame fight, Whitefeather was certain that he wasn't some virtual gaming greenhorn. The ferocity and decisiveness that he had displayed in his actions, as well as his wealth of combat experience, was something not even she, someone who had been with mythology for more than a decade, could achieve. However, she was now hearing that an unknown, fresh university graduate was behind the character of Black Flame. Miss Fong, you aren't here for only a small matter as verifying my identity, right? Shifeng asked calmly as he looked at Fong Shihan, who had a slightly excited expression on her face. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Ooh, a small matter? Guild leader Black Flame, do you know how much trouble Zero Wing will be in if the various powers find out about your identity? Whitefeather could not help but remind Shifeng when she saw his nonchalant attitude. Even if mythology doesn't do anything, so long as we spread this information, Zero Wing will instantly be devoured by the various powers, leaving nothing. If the various powers were to learn of Black Flame's true identity, they wouldn't stop at just harassing Zero Wing. Yet Shifeng actually placed no importance on this matter whatsoever. Feather, that's enough. I am indeed here for more than just this matter, Fong Shihan said as she gestured for Whitefeather to stand back. She then turned to Shifeng and continued, since you are being so straightforward, I'll just go straight to the point, Guild leader Black Flame. By this time, I'm afraid I'm not the only person to have realized your identity. I believe it won't be long before this piece of information spreads to the various powers as well. When that happens, I'm sure you know what kind of outcome awaits Zero-Wing. What are you trying to say then? Shifeng asked, a smile forming on his face. Stone Forest City and the method to grasp the spiritualization realm. Feng Shihan said. So long as Zero-Wing hands these two things over, Zero-Wing will be able to avoid all those problems. Moreover, mythology will also supply Zero-Wing with some S-rank nutrient fluids and life potions. I believe these should be things Zero-Wing urgently requires right now, correct? Chapter 2678. Upgrading Silverwing Town. Liangjing's complexion paled at Feng Shihan's demand. Setting aside the method to grasp the spiritualization realm, just handing over Stone Forest City would be more than enough to doom the current Zero-Wing. Over half of Zero-Wing's current income came from Stone Forest City. Moreover, it was also because of Stone Forest City that so many experts were joining Zero-Wing right now. It was no exaggeration to say that Stone Forest City was an integral part of Zero-Wing. If they were to lose Stone Forest City, she could not imagine what would become of the guild. However, if they refused to hand over Stone Forest City, Zero-Wing's situation wouldn't end up any better either. While Zero-Wing might not face any problems in God's domain, it would be a piece of cake for others to ruin Zero-Wing's operations in Fenglin City from the shadows. Guild leader Black Flame. I know this isn't an easy choice to make, but if Zero-Wing lacks a sufficient number of S-rank nutrient fluids and life potions, wouldn't it be difficult for the guild to develop further? Feng Shihan said, smiling. I believe you, as a Grandmaster martial artist, should know this very clearly. God's Domain was different from other virtual reality games. The game helped its players develop their minds to extraordinary standards, particularly when players raised their tiers, and they received huge boosts to their brain activity. This discovery had spurred excitement in many people. However, in exchange for this boost in brain activity, the energy players needed to sustain their minds and bodies also increased significantly. Besides the current Zero-Wing, many superpowers were having headaches over this energy problem. Meanwhile, as a result of this situation, S-rank nutrient fluids and life potions had become extremely rare on the market. It might have been fine if the volume required wasn't particularly high. It was still possible to purchase some of these energy solutions so long as one was willing to pay more credits. However, after the required volume reached a certain point, one wouldn't be able to purchase these energy solutions even if one had the money to do so. You're right. S-rank nutrient fluids and life potions are indeed the things Zero-Wing currently requires the most. In fact, this problem is even more troublesome than the harassment of outside parties, Shifeng said, nodding in agreement. After Shifeng became a neutralizing grandmaster, even S-rank nutrient fluids were somewhat insufficient to maintain his body and mind at peak condition. Only life potions met his needs. There wouldn't have been a problem if he was the only person who required these high-quality energy solutions. However, if he wanted the other members of Zero-Wing to improve themselves further and have a greater chance of reaching higher tiers, then they definitely could not lack a supply of S-rank nutrient fluids. If Zero-Wing could not secure a large supply of S-rank nutrient fluids and life potions within a short period, even if the various superpowers did not secretly harass Zero-Wing, it was only a matter of time before they surpassed Zero-Wing. Guild leader. Liangjing was startled when she heard Shifeng's words. Stone Forest City was currently one of the few guild cities established in a level 100 neutral map. If Shifeng were really to hand over Stone Forest City, Zero-Wing would suffer immense losses in God's domain. At that time, the leveling speed of Zero-Wing's guild members would plummet. In regard to this situation, both Matt and Whitefeather smiled. At least this kid is mindful of the situation. If he decides to sell Stone Forest City and the secrets of the spiritualization realm now, he can earn some money for them. If he waits until the various superpowers know his secret, nobody will want them even if he decides to sell them, Matt whispered. A neutralizing grandmaster would indeed be considered an absolute powerhouse in Fenglin City. However, experts of such caliber were only useful as a deterrent against ordinary powers, not against powerful major corporations. Not to mention, without sufficient S-rank nutrient fluids and life potions, Zero-Wing's peak experts would have difficulty further developing themselves. After all, A lot of energy was required to maintain the accelerated brain activity of peak experts, energy that A-rank nutrient fluids couldn't provide. Hence, the various superpowers contested hotly for S-rank nutrient fluids and life potions, driving up the rarity of these solutions. If you have already made your decision, we can immediately close a contract, Guild Leader Black Flame, Feng Shihan said, smiling. No, a contract won't be necessary, Shifeng said, shaking his head. I won't be selling Stone Forest City or the method to grasp the spiritualization realm. Silence momentarily filled the room after Shifeng spoke. Both Matt and Whitefeather gazed at Shifeng in shock, wondering if he had gone crazy. Did he really not grasp the direness of Zero Wing's situation? Guild Leader Black Flame, you need to think this through clearly. If you miss out on this opportunity, we won't offer you the same price next time, Feng Shihan said, a little surprised by Shifeng's response. By then, the problems Zero Wing will have to face will be far greater than what you can imagine. Currently, mythology could be said to be Zero Wing's only lifeline. This was also the reason behind Feng Shihan's confidence that Shifeng would not refuse her offer unless he really wished for Zero Wing's downfall. After all, without sufficient S-rank nutrient fluids and life potions, Zero Wing's future would be bleak. Thank you for your concern. If the various superpowers really wish to take covert action, I don't mind teaching them what a one-way trip is, Shifeng replied calmly. The current Zero Wing was no longer the same as before. This was especially true after he had become a neutralizing grandmaster. This was also why he did not particularly mind his identity getting exposed. After all, secretly dealing with a neutralizing grandmaster wasn't easy. Very well. Since you have already said so, we will take our leave first, Guild Leader Black Flame, Feng Shihan said. After seeing Shifeng remaining unfazed by her warning, she no longer tried to persuade him. Instead, she stood up and left the reception room. After exiting Zero Wing's main headquarters, Matt looked at Feng Shihan and asked, Vice Guild Leader, are we really going to leave just like that? The old instructor had told them to do their best to get their hands on the method to grasp the spiritualization realm. If they just left now, it would be much more difficult for them to obtain this method in the future. Relax. Zero Wing won't hold out for long. He might think that he has the power to protect himself after becoming a neutralizing grandmaster, but the superpowers aren't as simple as he thinks they are. He also doesn't know how crazy they are right now, Feng Shihan replied, smiling. It won't be long before he seeks us out himself. We don't need to rush. I guess you're right. After giving the matter some thought, Matt nodded in agreement and dropped the subject. In order to secure the benefits available in God's domain, the major corporations backing the various superpowers were going all out. To make matters worse, the present state of God's domain had pushed many superpowers to the brink of destruction. As a result, these superpowers were growing even crazier. One could easily imagine what those starving superpowers would do with a fat piece of meat like Zero Wing placed before them. After Feng Shihan's group left, only Shifeng and Liang Jing remained inside the top-floor reception room. Guild Leader, what should we do? Once that Feng Shihan returns, she'll definitely expose your identity to the various powers, Liang Jing said as she looked anxiously at Shifeng. While Zero Wing had managed to retain Stone Forest City, a big problem now loomed. It's fine even if my identity gets exposed. They can spread it all they want. What we need to do remains the same, Shifeng replied calmly. What do we need to do? Liang Jing asked curiously as she took in Shifeng's calm expression. Earn money, Shifeng retorted, chuckling. Whether it was developing the guild in God's domain or purchasing S-rank nutrient fluids and life potions, these actions required money to accomplish. Without money, nothing would get done. Currently, it was basically impossible for Zero Wing to obtain additional S-rank nutrient fluids and life potions from its usual sources. Fortunately, he had the invitation to participate in Green God Company's auction, which was also the only way for the guild to secure a large volume of these high-quality energy solutions. However, with how desperate the various superpowers were for S-rank nutrient fluids and life potions right now, if he did not prepare a sufficiently large sum of credits, he wouldn't stand a chance in the auction. Hence, what he needed to do now was earn money. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. You earn money? When Liang Jing heard Shifeng's answer, she shook her head dejectedly and said, I'm afraid that will be very difficult right now. Due to the constant suppression of the various superpowers, we have no choice but to obtain resources by ourselves. However, the resources we obtain are barely enough for our own use. We don't have any surplus to sell. Moreover, Stone Forest City's player population has also been decreasing because of the harassment. In addition, the Faux Saint monsters have already conquered nearly half of Star Moon Kingdom. Our guild's income is decreasing by the day. Relax. That is in the past, Shifeng said, chuckling. After saying so, Shifeng had Liang Jing send someone to replenish the nutrient solution for his virtual gaming cabin. He then did some simple exercises and had a proper meal before logging back into God's domain without hesitation. Once Shifeng was back in Silverwing Town, he promptly called out the town's interface and chose to upgrade the town. Shortly after, a system notification sounded in the ears of every player in Silverwing Town as they got teleported out of the town. Chapter 2679 Promotion Frenzy Orc Empire, Silverwing Town. After Zero Wing's victory over the Faux Saint army, independent players started flocking to Silverwing Town from all over the Orc Empire. The members of many powers also came for a better look at Silverwing Town's situation. As a result, Silverwing Town became incredibly lively for a time. As players crowded into Silverwing Town, a 20-man team entered the town in an orderly manner. The players who saw this team could not help gaping in shock. What? Even they have come to develop in Silverwing Town? Every member of this 20-man team was a level 115 plus, Tier 3 expert geared in dazzling equipment. Even the weakest piece of equipment they sported was at level 110 fine gold rank. The two people walking in the lead were even geared in level 100 plus epic equipment. This was an incredibly rare sight even among the various superpowers experts. However, compared to the levels and equipment of these players, what truly surprised everyone was their identities. This was because this team belonged to Frost Heaven, a superpower originating from the frozen world, which had unified several of the neighboring kingdoms. Frost Heaven's strength could easily rank within the top 10 up-and-coming superpowers. Due to Frost Heaven's access to the frozen world's special bloodline legacy, many expert players were seeking to join the guild. Unfortunately, its recruitment conditions were incredibly stringent. As a result, a large majority of the applicants were disqualified. Now that Frost Heaven's members, who did not operate within the Orc Empire, had come to Silverwing Town, how could everyone not feel surprised? Although the surrounding players were quietly discussing Frost Heaven's members, the Frost Heaven members in question paid no heed to the players around them, taking their time walking down the main street while observing Silverwing Town. So this is Silverwing Town? A black-clad, level 116 female summoner muttered after inspecting her surroundings. Calmly, she commented, while the town's defenses are good, it's still considerably inferior to the other allied guilds' guild towns. It is completely reliant on those personal guards to stay afloat. This town is already quite excellent. At the very least, it has managed to stop the attacks of the Faux Saint army. It is worth recruiting into the alliance, said a female cursemancer, who was similarly level 116, bitterly smiling at her companion's words. The Faux Saint army was something even ordinary NPC cities were incapable of stopping, let alone guild towns and cities. Just the fact that Silverwing Town was able to defeat the Faux Saint army was already an incredible feat after all. Not every guild town possessed the Frozen World's special methods. While these personal guards are indeed strong, those Faux Saint monsters are no pushovers either. Those monsters have already spread out to over a dozen kingdoms and the Black Dragon Empire. With their growth rate, I'm afraid a large group of Tier 4 Faux Saint Devourers will appear in a few days. At that time, these personal guards will most likely have trouble fending off the Faux Saint monsters, much less taking the initiative to hunt down those monsters, the black-clad summoner said as she shook her head. Moreover, our purpose in coming here is to observe whether Zero Wing is truly qualified to join us in dealing with the Faux Saint monsters or not. We're not necessarily here to recruit it. After all was said and done, personal guards could only be considered an external tool. The first reason for this was the incredible rarity of powerful personal guards. The second reason was the difficulty of resurrecting fallen NPCs. Currently, Silverwing Town might have a lot of players, but the town's Tier 3 player population was pitifully low. I guess you're right. Zero Wing might seem to be flourishing right now, but it is actually in a very precarious situation. The guild simply doesn't know that Saint's Hand has already partnered with many superpowers. Even if the faux Saint monsters don't take action against Zero Wing, Saint's Hand can simply supply the various superpowers with the necessary support tools to thrive in the faux Saint monsters' territory, and in return, the various superpowers will do their best to suppress Zero Wing's members. If Zero Wing does not possess enough players to fight for it, it can only hole up in its guild town and rely on the protection of its personal guards, unable to do anything more, the black-clad Cursemancer said, nodding in agreement after giving the matter some thought. Just like the summoner had said, a guild that could only defend and not retaliate did indeed lack the qualifications to join their alliance and become their partner. Meanwhile, as the level 116 summoner and level 116 Cursemancer from Frost Heaven were conversing, a system notification suddenly entered their ears. System. Silverwing Town has been promoted to Basic City. You will be teleported out of Silverwing Town in 30 seconds. What's going on? The town got promoted? The system notification stunned the players in Silverwing Town, their minds falling into a daze for quite some time as they stared at their notification windows. As for Zero Wing's members, they revealed ecstatic expressions on their faces. As an advanced town, Silverwing Town had already been able to repel the faux Saint army's attack effortlessly. Now that Silverwing Town was getting promoted to Basic City, it would pose a much more difficult challenge for the faux Saint army. Before anyone could properly react to the situation, every player inside Silverwing Town was teleported out of it. At the same time, a magic array enveloped the town. How is this possible? The black-clad female summoner from Frost Heaven exclaimed as she gazed at the magic array veiling Silverwing Town in astonishment. Setting aside Silverwing Town's prosperity, its player population alone is still far short of the requirements of promotion. It should have taken the town at least another month to get promoted to Basic City. How could it get promoted so quickly? Frost Heaven had ample experience in promoting guild towns and cities. Hence, the team could tell that Silverwing Town's defenses already met the required standard for promotion, but its player population was still insufficient. This was a condition that could be fulfilled only by gradually accruing popularity among players. Yet now, Silverwing Town had actually gotten promoted. At this moment, aside from Frost Heaven's members, even the other superpowers members secretly operating within Silverwing Town were stupefied by this situation. A third guild city. Some superpowers didn't even have 3 guild cities, yet not only did Zero Wing possess 3 guild cities now, but all 3 guild cities were actually established in strategic locations. This was especially true for Silverwing Town. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. After all, the faux Saint monsters had already extended their sphere of activity to the dozen or so neighboring kingdoms, as well as the Black Dragon Empire. Due to the arrival of these faux Saint monsters, many of the local maps had been transformed into high-level maps, with some even becoming level 120 maps. In addition, since these kingdoms and empires would have to deal with these faux Saint monsters, plenty of kingdom and empire quests would definitely be issued in the future. Through these points, one could easily predict that the players of the affected kingdoms and the Black Dragon Empire would be operating in the faux Saint monsters' territory in the future. However, as these maps were originally at the borders of the various countries, there were hardly enough shelters or strongholds for players to rest in nearby. Since the Orc Empire served as a hub connecting the various countries, the future development of any guild city there would be terrific. Meanwhile, shortly after Silverwing Town's players were teleported out of the town, news of the town's promotion spread like wildfire, quickly reaching the ears of the various powers and causing a frenzy. Chapter 2680 Silverwing City Fire Dragon Empire, Flame Dragon City, Scorching Flame Restaurant. As soon as Cold Shadow logged back into the game, she was greeted by the sight of a tall and beautiful woman standing before her. This woman was none other than White Feather, who had similarly logged back into the game not long ago. However, White Feather wore an indescribably gloomy expression on her face. Did something happen? Cold Shadow asked, a hint of confusion appearing in her silver eyes. We just received news that Zero Wing's Silverwing Town has been promoted to Basic City. Many of the powers operating around the Orc Empire are now heading toward Silverwing Town. They all plan to establish a long-term partnership with Zero Wing. Some superpowers are also considering doing the same, White Feather reported in a quiet tone. Silverwing Town got promoted into a city? Cold Shadow was a little surprised when she heard White Feather's words. Realization then struck her. She smiled and said, "No wonder he rejected my offer without hesitation. It seems this was why he had the confidence to do so." Vice Guild Leader, if Zero-Wing really gains the protection of several more superpowers, we will have a much more difficult time obtaining the method to grasp the spiritualization realm. Why don't we contact Saint's Hand and have it warn off those superpowers? White Feather suggested worriedly. Their superiors had given them only one task: to obtain the method to grasp the spiritualization realm. Everything else was secondary. If Zero-Wing gained the protection of several superpowers in the real world, any superpower that wished to target Zero-Wing in secret would have a difficult time doing so. That won't be necessary. So what if those superpowers band together to protect Zero-Wing? Cold Shadow said, smiling as she read the report White Feather forwarded to her. Now that Black Flame's identity has been exposed, Starlink won't let this opportunity get away. Before I logged back into God's domain, I received news that the old fellow behind Lu Xinglua has finally lost his patience and is planning to remove all of Zero-Wing's roots in Fenglin City. With Zero-Wing's current manpower, it won't be able to hold out for long. All we need to do is wait. Lu Xinglua himself did not possess any noteworthy skill sets. In fact, a large part of the reason why the Starlink Guild was able to develop to such an extent was the old fellow supporting Lu Xinglua. Even several superpowers working together wouldn't be enough to stop that old fellow. Even in mythology, only a handful of people could go up against him. I understand. I'll have someone keep a close eye on Zero-Wing during this period, White Feather said, nodding. During the time Cold Shadow and White Feather were conversing, Silverwing Town's promotion had finally completed. When the magic array disappeared, the town that previously sat atop a sand dune was no more. In its place was a magnificent city. Whether in terms of size or defensive standards, the new Silverwing city far surpassed the old Silverwing town. In fact, even while standing outside the city, one could distinctly feel a dense stream of mana flowing into the city from the surroundings. What astonishing mana! Shurfeng was surprised when he sensed the influx of mana into the city. Upon Silverwing Town's promotion to Silverwing City, its core magic array had received a significant improvement. Due to that, as well as the city's 5 magic towers, Silverwing City could practically rival Stone Forest City in mana density. If players were to rest in Silverwing City, the effects they gained might not be as excellent as what they would enjoy when resting in Stone Forest City's Freedom Hotel, but the result would still be quite excellent. It definitely wouldn't be an exaggeration to call Silverwing City a sacred land for players to rest in. Due to the incursion of the faux saint monsters, many maps in the Orc Empire had transformed into level 100+ neutral maps. Normally, players would have considered this a matter worth celebrating. Unfortunately, not only did these new level 100+ neutral maps have very thin mana, but due to the Orc Empire's special circumstances, players also could not use flying mounts and return scrolls there. Moreover, there were still the corrosive foreign energies present in all neutral maps. As a result, most players were leery of operating in these newly created neutral maps. However, the appearance of Silverwing City in the Orc Empire could resolve many of these problems. At the very least, players would no longer have to travel to a distant NPC city to recover. In fact, players would enjoy a much faster recovery rate when resting in Silverwing City than in NPC cities. However, what truly excited Shurfeng wasn't the change to the city's mana density, but to the city's airport. Originally, Silverwing Town's airport was only the size of a sports arena. However, after Silverwing Town's promotion, the airport received a massive improvement as well. Now, not only had the airport tripled in size, but the number of airship platforms it housed had also increased by several fold. Now that Silverwing Town has become Silverwing City, I just need to spend some coins to open up air routes to the various kingdoms' capital cities. Once that's done, players from the various kingdoms can travel directly to Silverwing City. At that time, just the income from collecting transportation fees would most likely rival the Freedom Hotel's income. Shurfeng was filled with excitement and anticipation as he looked at the distant airport. In the past, airports had been one of the main sources of income for guild cities. After all, Not every player possessed a flying mount or a private house in the various guild cities. Hence, the airships became one of the main modes of transportation for a large majority of God's Domain's player base. Previously, Silverwing Town's airport was allowed to have only one air route. However, after the town got promoted to Basic City, its airport could have up to 5 air routes. This number would also increase as the airport or city got upgraded. Before Sherfong could recover from his joy over the airport's transformation, the sound of a system notification entered his ears. System. Congratulations. Your Silverwing Town has been promoted into Silverwing City. The transportation firm has met the requirements for promotion to bronze rank. Do you wish to promote the transportation firm? It has reached the bronze rank already? Sherfong was stunned when he saw the system notification. The transportation firm was a very special construction. Its promotion system was completely different from that of ordinary constructions. Instead of requiring money or a promotion order, one needed to meet a set of conditions to promote the construction. In the past, powers that owned a transportation firm had generally succeeded in upgrading their firm to the bronze rank only after their guild cities reached the advanced city standard. And as far as Sherfong knew, even the best performing powers had managed to meet their transportation firm's promotion conditions only after their guild cities had reached the intermediate city standard. Now, Silverwing Town had just been promoted to Basic City, yet its transportation firm already met the conditions for promotion. Naturally, Sherfong was surprised. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Once a transportation firm reached the bronze rank, it would truly gain the ability to drive a guild city's economy. After all, at the bronze rank, the transportation firm would no longer limit its business to the country it was based in. It would expand its operations beyond the borders, becoming a hub that connected the neighboring kingdoms and empires. Even NPCs belonging to neutral powers would start using it as a hub. In other words, not only would it become possible to find merchandise traded by the various countries' neutral powers in the transportation firm, but the transportation firm itself could even become a place where NPC merchants would develop their business. To put it simply, so long as a guild city possessed a bronze-rank transportation firm, the members of the ruling guild would gain a significant boost in income. The guild city in question would also have a much easier time becoming a main city. Meanwhile, after glancing at the system notification, Sherfong chose to upgrade the transportation firm without hesitation. Chapter 2681. Arrogant Zero Wing? System. Transportation firm can be reconstructed once after promotion at the cost of 40,000 gold and 100,000 magic crystals. Do you wish to proceed with the reconstruction? Note: promotion will take place even without the reconstruction. Reconstruct it, Sherfong said without hesitation. While Zero Wing's funds were indeed tight, the guild still had around 100,000 gold and 400,000 magic crystals reserved for unexpected expenditures. And although reconstructing the transportation firm would not grant it any additional functions, there was one benefit: accommodating more NPC merchants to do business within it. If a transportation firm had more NPC merchants, not only would there be more quests available for players to pick up, but there would also be more merchandise for sale. Both of these factors would attract more players to develop in Silverwing City. As soon as Sherfong made his decision, 40,000 gold and 100,000 magic crystals vanished from his bag. Immediately afterward, the transportation firm, which stood at the edge of the city, transformed into a cloud of black mist that expanded rapidly, growing to the size of 4 sports arenas in just 5 seconds, then dissipated. When the black mist cleared, a 5-story tall building appeared in its place. While Sherfong was quietly observing the reconstructed transportation firm, Yulan suddenly contacted him. Guild leader, we've finished setting up the city's security measures. We have also set the entrance fee to 10 silver, as you instructed. We can open Silverwing City at any time, Yulan said excitedly. Previously, after news of Silverwing Town's promotion spread, many players from the neighboring kingdoms had eagerly made their way over to take a look at the city. Based on rough estimates, at least 2 million players had camped outside the city. With so many players seeking entry, Zero Wing could earn a small fortune just by collecting entrance fees. Previously, Silverwing Town couldn't collect any entrance fees since it was a town. Its main sources of income back then were shop rentals and the candlelight trading firm. Now that they could collect entrance fees from players visiting Silverwing City, the financial problems Zerowing was currently facing would definitely be resolved. "All right, open the city," Shifeng said, chuckling. After receiving Shifeng's approval, Yulan promptly deactivated the magic array inside the city lord's mansion that prevented outsiders from entering the city. Immediately, the opaque magic barrier enveloping Silverwing City shattered, and the city appeared before the eyes of everyone outside the city. The instant Silverwing City was open to the public, the crowd waiting outside the city walls was dumbfounded. "Crap! How spectacular! Isn't this city on the same standard as Stone Forest City? The appearance isn't the only thing that's marvelous. The mana radiating from Silverwing City feels just slightly inferior to Stone Forest Cities. I'm just wondering how much the entrance fee will be. If it's too expensive, ordinary players like ourselves will have a difficult time developing in Silverwing City." Everyone was curious about Silverwing City's current situation. It might be fine if it were any other guild city, but Silverwing City was the only guild city in the Faux Saint Monsters territory. Previously, Silverwing Town was already able to fend off an army of more than 4 million Faux Saint Monsters as an advanced town. Now that it was a basic city, the Faux Saint Monsters would most likely be helpless against it for the foreseeable future. Hence, one could say that Silverwing City was currently the safest location within the Faux Saint Monsters territory. Meanwhile, safety was the #1 priority of both ordinary players and experts. At this stage of the game, many players would fall into despair over even a single death. After all, after reaching level 100 and beyond, not only did leveling up become much more difficult, but level 100 plus equipment was also incredibly precious. Losing a single piece of level 100 plus equipment would set a player back by days or even weeks. However, after the gathered players lined up at Silverwing City's main gate, they were stupefied by what they saw. An entrance fee of 10 silver? Is Zerowing insane? The black-clad, female summoner from Frost Heaven exclaimed, her eyes widening in shock as she looked at the Tier 3 personal guards collecting the entrance fee. Currently, guild cities located in neutral maps generally charged players an entrance fee of only 2 silver. While it was reasonable for Silverwing City's entrance fee to be a little more expensive, as it was the only guild city in the Faux Saint Monsters territory, a 10 silver entrance fee was 5 times the going rate. Moreover, the map Silverwing City sat on was not very high-leveled. Even after the transformation due to the Faux Saint Monsters, the map had only been upgraded into a level 80 neutral map, not a level 100 plus neutral map. If players wished to head to level 100 plus neutral maps to grind, they would still need to travel quite a distance. Hence, Silverwing City could, at best, be considered a transit station and resting place. Players didn't need to stop by the city to grind in the Orc Empire's level 100 plus maps. The female summoner from Frost Heaven wasn't the only person stunned by Silverwing City's exorbitant entrance fee. The various superpowers members that were planning to enter the city were too. They could not help suspecting that Zerowing had gone crazy for money. Originally, there were already very few players willing to operate within the Faux Saint Monsters territory. After all, the Faux Saint Monsters only allowed players to level up faster. They did not drop any weapons or equipment, and the coins and materials they dropped were inferior compared to the loot from other monsters. Not to mention, operating within the territory of Faux Saint Monsters was much more dangerous than operating elsewhere. While a 10 silver entrance fee wouldn't be much of a problem for Tier 3 experts, it was a huge expenditure for Tier 2 players. If Zerowing insisted on a 10 silver entrance fee for Silverwing City, hardly any Tier 2 players would be willing to visit the city. Meanwhile, just how many Tier 3 experts were there in God's domain right now? Crap! Does Zerowing take us for fools? Zerowing really has gotten arrogant. A 10 silver entrance fee? Does Zerowing really think we need to develop in the Orc Empire? A large number of Tier 2 players complained about Silverwing City's entrance fee, some even ranting in rage. Previously, they could continue operating within the Faux Saint Monsters territory only because it did not cost any money to enter Silverwing Town. By collecting a 10 silver entrance fee now, Zerowing was basically chasing Tier 2 players like themselves away from Silverwing City. In the meantime, a heavy atmosphere shrouded a 1,000-man team standing some distance away from Silverwing City's main gate. Vice Commander, An entrance fee of 10 silver is simply too much. If we have to pay such a fee, after deducting all our daily expenses, our Tier 2 brothers will earn almost nothing. I suggest we head somewhere else to develop. It is simply impossible for us to continue developing in Silverwing City, a level 107, Tier 2 Berserker said as he looked at Solid Wind. I truly did not think that Zero Wing would be so ruthless. We should have followed suit with the other adventurer teams and headed to one of the kingdoms or the Dark Knight Empire to develop, a level 113, Tier 3 male elementalist grumbled. Wind, this price is indeed too high. We can't afford it in the long term. Why don't we head to the Dark Knight Empire and take a look there? I heard that there are guild cities established in level 100 plus neutral maps there as well. Moreover, those cities are also collecting a 10 silver entrance fee. Crazed Bull suggested. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Many other members of the Blood Pact adventurer team nodded their heads in agreement. Compared to paying 10 silver to Zero Wing for no good reason, it would be much better to spend that 10 silver in a guild city located in a level 100 neutral map. They would definitely gain a much better harvest there than in the Orc Empire. Alright then. However, we still have some quests we need to turn in, Solid Wind said, sighing. Bull, you and a few others will follow me inside. Everyone else wait outside. The other Blood Pact members nodded in acknowledgement of Solid Wind's instructions. Aside from Blood Pact, the other adventurer teams made similar decisions, delegating the submission of their completed quests in the city to a handful of Tier 3 experts, while planning to leave the Orc Empire entirely or head to one of the guild towns to continue developing within the Empire. Following which, despite the large number of players gathered outside Silverwing City, only a small number of Tier 3 experts actually entered the city. Chapter 2682 Madness-inducing Silverwing City. As the various powers and adventurer teams' Tier 3 experts entered Silverwing City, the relatively empty streets of the city grew crowded. Sure enough, the city became much bigger after getting promoted. The density of the ambient mana also increased by a lot. It's a pity that the entrance fee is too high. If it were 5 silver instead, the neighboring kingdom's players would most likely pour in. Crazed Bull sighed as he looked at the streets teeming with NPCs. If possible, he really wished to continue his development in Silverwing City. Unfortunately, the entrance fee of 10 silver was simply unaffordable for ordinary Tier 2 experts. After all, many players would most likely enter Silverwing City multiple times a day since Tier 2 players weren't as resistant to the foreign energies in level 100 plus neutral maps as Tier 3 players were. They could survive in level 100 plus neutral maps for only a few hours per trip. Fortunately, Tier 2 players recovered from these foreign energies very quickly, so they generally could make 2 or 3 trips to level 100 plus neutral maps per day. However, each additional trip meant they had to pay another 10 silver coins to enter Silverwing City. Originally, earning money was already a difficult task in the Faux Saint Monsters territory. Paying an additional 20 or 30 silver per day would be onerous on Tier 2 players' finances. After all, Tier 2 players had plenty of other expenditures they needed to cover: training, repair fees, lodgings, food, and beverages. Moreover, if a Tier 2 player wished to reach Tier 3, they needed excellent equipment and powerful Tier 2 skills and spells. In order to earn money, some Tier 2 players would even invest a significant portion of their time grinding for materials in lower-leveled maps, which in turn caused their levels to lag. Currently, only Tier 3 experts could afford Silverwing City's 10 silver entrance fee. However, how rare were Tier 3 experts? Not to mention, with the abilities of Tier 3 experts, they had their choice of leveling grounds. They didn't need to remain in the Orc Empire. The other Tier 3 experts of Blood Pact bobbed their heads in agreement with Crazed Bull's words. They felt that Zero Wing was basically chasing away players from Silverwing City. With this, the several guild towns established in the Orc Empire would flourish while Zero Wing would have only an empty guild city. After conversing for some time, Blood Pact's members made their way to the transportation firm to turn in their completed quests. However, Crazed Bull and the others were stunned to see the massive transportation firm, which could easily fit 4 sports arenas. What's going on? What did Zero Wing do? The current transportation firm was on a completely different level than the one before. There was also an unbelievably large number of NPCs entering and leaving the building. Previously, there would usually be only a few dozen NPCs entering and leaving the building at any time. Now, however, not only had this number increased beyond 200, but many of these NPCs were even nobles or people of neutral races. This was a rare sight. Before Crazed Bull and the others could react to this situation, several teams of Tier 3 experts walked out of the transportation firm one after another, every player on these teams wearing ecstatic looks on their faces. Moreover, every one of these teams had either a luxuriously dressed NPC noble or a neutral NPC following behind them. It was obvious that these teams had picked up a quest commissioned by these NPCs. Am I dreaming? Why are there so many quests from NPC nobles and neutral NPCs? Crazed Bull rubbed his eyes in doubt at the scene before him. Normally, a quest commissioned by an NPC noble or a neutral NPC would appear in the transportation firm only once a day or every few days. Meanwhile, every one of these quests could spark a frenzy among the various top adventurer teams and large guilds. The reason for this was the minimum difficulty rating for these quests, which was 3-star advanced. Not only could players obtain a large amount of coins and contribution points by completing these quests, but they also had a fixed chance of receiving level 100 plus, top-tier weapons and equipment or Tier 3 skill and spell books. Moreover, even if players weren't lucky and didn't get any of these bonus items, the monetary reward would be enough for players to purchase a piece of relatively good level 100 plus equipment for themselves. Hence, many adventurer teams secretly fought over these quests. Now, however, multiple teams had actually managed to pick up such a quest. Crazed Bull couldn't believe his eyes. Quick! We need to hurry inside and take a look. Solid Wind barked after snapping out of her daze. Upon hearing Solid Wind's words, the other Blood Pact members nodded and charged into the building. They wanted to know what exactly had happened to the transportation firm for there to be so many 3-star advanced quests. When Solid Wind and the others entered the transportation firm, they were stupefied at the scene before them. Inside the transportation firm's spacious lobby, long queues of NPC merchants snaked in front of the reception desks. At a glance, these NPCs easily numbered more than 5,000. Moreover, many of these NPCs were even NPC nobles and neutral NPCs. The gigantic, translucent quest crystal hovering in the center of the lobby actually displayed numerous 3-star advanced quests. The top few entries of the list were even 4-star quests, something they had never seen before. Delivery to the Black Dragon Empire's Border Fortress Fret. Difficulty 4-star. Requirement Tier 3. Team must have at least one person that has completed 10 3-star advanced quests and 20 3-star quests. All other members must have completed at least 10 3-star quests. Remuneration 50 gold and 3,000 contribution points. Additional rewards unknown. Recruiting 50 people. Delivery to the neutral zone Silent City. Difficulty 4-star. Requirement Tier 3. Team must have at least one person that has completed 12 3-star advanced quests. All other members must have completed at least 5 3-star quests. Remuneration 60 gold, 2,000 contribution points, and an elf's gift 15% chance to obtain a dark gold item of the same level, 25% chance to obtain a fine gold item of the same level. Recruiting 100 people. When the eyes of Solid Wind and the other Blood Pact members landed on the rewards of the 4-star quests, they wished they could accept these quests immediately. Setting aside the additional rewards, just the coins and contribution points these quests awarded were more than enough to make Tier 3 experts like themselves go crazy. Bull. Log out and contact the commander. Have the commander negotiate with the other adventurer teams. We need to secure these 4-star quests before the others do. Solid Wind said urgently. It was impossible for an individual adventurer team to take on a 4-star quest. At least 2 adventurer teams worth of Tier 3 experts would be needed to challenge a 4-star quest. However, if they could complete a 4-star quest, they would raise Blood Pact's overall strength by a small margin. Alright, logging out now, Crazed Bull said as he hurriedly clicked the log out button. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. As for Solid Wind and the others, they promptly contacted the other Blood Pact members outside the city and had them come to the transportation firm right away. Their excitement was palpable to the other players around them. However, none of the surrounding players found the reactions of Blood Pact's members surprising at all. After all, Blood Pact wasn't the only group aiming for the 4-star quests. The members of other adventurer teams and guilds that had visited the transportation firm earlier had reacted in a similar fashion. They all either notified their superiors about the transportation firm, or had their other companions rush to the transportation firm. For a time, large numbers of the Tier 2 players camped outside Silverwing City thronged to the city's main gate with bloodshot eyes. In the blink of an eye, the main gate swarmed with players. If not for everyone fearing the personal guards stationed by the gate, they would have most likely started a fight to enter the city. Meanwhile, when the black-clad summoner from Frost Heaven, who had already entered the city, saw the disturbance at the gate, she was stunned. What's going on? Chapter 2683. Crimson-Eyed Sword Saint's Legacy. At this moment, the female summoner from Frost Heaven wasn't the only person surprised by the sudden turn of events at Silverwing City's main gate. The Tier 3 experts who had just entered the city were similarly stunned to see the mob of Tier 2 players desperately trying to get in. Have these people lost their minds? For current Tier 2 players, a 10 silver entrance fee was a significant expenditure. Not to mention, just a short while ago, these Tier 2 players were still complaining about the expensive entrance fee and hoping to see Silverwing City flop. Now, however, these same Tier 2 players were desperately trying to get the NPCs stationed at the gate to take their money, their bloodshot eyes making it seem as if they would start a fight if the NPCs refused to take their money. However, before the Tier 3 experts standing before the city gate could properly process the situation, batch after batch of Tier 2 players rushed into the city, their numbers simply staggering. As soon as these Tier 2 players got past the gate, they dashed towards Silverwing City's transportation firm like a pack of cheetahs, expressions of ecstasy writ large on their faces. What did Zero Wing do? The female summoner from Frost Heaven could not help her confusion when she saw the various powers and adventurer teams' Tier 2 members running past her toward a distant corner of the city. Just a moment ago, the players had clearly given up on Silverwing City because of its exorbitant entrance fee. Now, however, players were jostling to enter the city. Moreover, there did not seem to be an end to the stream of players pouring in. At this rate, Zero Wing would become filthy rich just from the entrance fees of Silverwing City. These people seemed to be rushing toward the transportation firm. Something must have changed there. The female cursemancer standing beside the summoner said as she looked at the direction the crowd of players was taking. The transportation firm? The female summoner found her companion's words a little hard to believe. She simply couldn't figure out what kind of changes the transportation firm could have undergone to provoke such a frantic reaction from so many Tier 2 players. However, the female summoner did not put too much thought into the matter. Instead, she and her team followed the crowd to the transportation firm. When Frost Heaven's members arrived inside the crowded transportation firm's lobby, their eyes widened involuntarily in shock, every one of them at a loss for words. Just by doing one delivery quest, every player involved could get a monetary reward of 60 gold, as well as other rewards. This was an income even Tier 3 peak experts like themselves were incapable of earning within 1 or 2 days, yet there were actually 6 of such delivery quests available. Moreover, aside from the 6 4-star quests, there were a ton of 3-star advanced quests, which similarly granted lucrative rewards that could match the total daily income of Tier 3 peak experts like themselves. If they focused on grinding and making money for an entire day, not only would they have to sacrifice a large amount of their training time, but the income they generated would also be limited to coins. They wouldn't receive any weapons or equipment. However, the 3-star advanced quests granted a large amount of coins upon completion, as well as contribution points and top-tier weapons and equipment. Doing these delivery quests was even more lucrative than raiding super large-scale team dungeons. With how low the drop rate was in team dungeons, there definitely wouldn't be enough weapons and equipment dropped for everyone in the team. Moreover, there was also the problem of class compatibility. On the other hand, every player that took part in the delivery quests would have a considerably high chance of obtaining a top-tier weapon or equipment that suited their class. One could say that, so long as players kept doing these 3-star advanced delivery quests, their income, EXP gain, and equipment acquisition rate would already rival those of Tier 3 peak experts. It's no wonder these people reacted so crazily. I truly underestimated Zero Wing. With these tempting quests, let alone a 10 silver entrance fee, even if the fee were 20 silver, there would still be a ton of players seeking to develop in Silverwing City, the black-clad summoner commented as realization dawned upon her. Since even a Tier 3 peak expert like herself felt tempted by the delivery quests available in the transportation firm, the attraction the firm held for Tier 2 players and ordinary Tier 3 experts was easy to imagine. Mushin, I just relayed this information to the guild leader. The guild leader says we can proceed with the partnership, the female Kursmancer said. Isn't the guild leader being too hasty? Although the transportation firm's quests and Silverwing City's defenses will ensure the city's future as the trade hub of the Orc Empire and the neighboring kingdoms, it still won't be easy for Zero Wing to take the initiative to strike back at the faux Saint monsters. Zero Wing won't be of any help to our alliance at all. At best, we can only use its Silverwing City as a resting spot, the female summoner named Mushin said, frowning. Zero Wing's transportation firm was indeed amazing, but the alliance Frost Heaven formed was no ordinary existence either. Anyone who became a member of the alliance would gain benefits beyond what they could normally get from partnering with ordinary superpowers. This was also why she and her team had come to observe Zero Wing and verify its qualifications. Are we still going then? The female Kursmancer asked as she looked at Mushin. Aside from being a domain realm expert and a vice guild leader of Frost Heaven, Mushin was also the heiress of the Boulder Corporation, a top-ranking international corporation that stood above even the Starline Corporation. Since the Boulder Corporation supplied more than half of Frost Heaven's resources, Mushin's standing in the guild was not at all lower than the guild leader's. Hence, the guild leader had to take Mushin's opinion into heavy consideration on important matters. Since the guild leader has already said so, let's go take a look first. If Zero Wing really has the potential and strength to fight the faux Saint monsters, letting it join the alliance isn't exactly impossible, Mushin said after giving the matter some thought. However, if I find Zero Wing wanting, then we'll have to choose another target to recruit. I'll get in touch with Zero Wing now then, the female Kursmancer said with a sigh of relief at Mushin's answer. In her opinion, Silverwing City's potential was truly massive. Even without Frost Heaven's help, the city would still flourish. In fact, it might even become an integral location for the Alliance's fight against the faux Saint monsters in the future. However, if Mushin was really opposed to Zero Wings joining the Alliance, then even the guild leader would have difficulty persuading her. While Mushin and the others were conversing, news regarding the transportation firm also spread quickly. As a result, many of the powers heading back to their respective kingdoms promptly did a U-turn, with some even planning to make Silverwing City a long-term headquarters of theirs. As Silverwing City's player population was booming, Shifeng finished accepting the Crimson-Eyed Sword Saint's legacy. Sure enough, breaking through the limits of the epic mana body isn't that easy. Shifeng breathed out a deep sigh as he looked at the shattered memory crystal in his hand. Originally, he thought that with the effects of the 8 soul marks and the Crimson-Eyed Sword Saint's legacy, he could instantly break the shackles of his epic mana body. Unfortunately, things didn't work out as he planned, leaving him still one step shy of a breakthrough. Although he had long since known that it was much more difficult to break through the limits of an epic mana body than it was for a gold mana body, he never thought that the difficulty would be this high. Despite relying on the Crimson-Eyed Sword Saints and Heavenly Blue Saints' experiences, no matter how he tweaked the circulation of mana in his mana body, he still couldn't surpass the perfect state. Of course, that didn't mean Shifeng had gained absolutely nothing from the Crimson-Eyed Sword Saint's guidance. By relying on Elvo's experiences and techniques, he could now circulate the mana inside his body 20% faster than before. For other players, such an improvement wouldn't yield any significant effects. However, for someone like Shifeng who possessed a natural domain, it was akin to a 20% boost to his reaction speed, a massive improvement. Moreover, his mana domain had also become much denser and more solid. If Shifeng were to go up against a faux Saint Devourer now, he was confident he could beat the living daylights out of the mythic monster without even resorting to his mana technique and Black Dragon's soul. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. At this time Yulan suddenly called Shifeng and said, Guild leader, some representatives from Frost Heaven have paid us a visit. They say they wish to discuss a partnership. Frost Heaven? Shifeng was not unfamiliar with this name. In fact, this was a very famous name during his previous life. After all, Frost Heaven was one of the 12 great guilds of God's domain, a true titan in the game. However, Frost Heaven had maintained a very low profile during the early stages of God's domain, so much so that barely anyone had thought about the guild. To everyone's surprise, though, Frost Heaven had actually been the first superpower in the game to successfully produce a Tier 4 player, an incident that had propelled the guild into the spotlight and made it known by everyone in the game. "Do you wish to meet them?" Yulan asked when she saw Silverwing turning contemplative. "Have them wait in the City Lord's mansion's reception room," Silverwing said, nodding. He then tidied up his workspace before leaving his fourth-floor office and making his way to the first-floor reception room. Chapter 2684 Mana Domain Silverwing City, City Lord's Mansion. Under Yulan's lead, Mushin and the other Frost Heaven members arrived before the entrance of the City Lord's Mansion. Currently, a large number of NPCs, as well as players wearing the merchant's insignia, were lining up outside the tall walls of the mansion. The liveliness here could easily rival the frenzy at Silverwing City's main gate. This city is truly amazing. Despite having been promoted just recently, there are already so many NPC and player merchants coming forth to rent shops here. I doubt even the various superpowers' main headquarters received this much attention when they got promoted into basic cities, the female cursemancer from Frost Heaven exclaimed as she looked at the long line of NPCs and players standing outside the City Lord's mansion. Aside from being the core that controlled the City Lord's mansion also managed the city's lands and shops. Anyone seeking to rent or purchase land and shops inside the city had to visit the City Lord's mansion to do so. Generally, however, neither player nor NPC merchants would rent a recently promoted city's lands and shops. They would generally do so only after thorough consideration and observation to determine whether an investment would really be profitable. However, despite Silverwing City having just been promoted and opened to the public less than an hour ago, there were already close to 1,000 players and NPCs waiting to enter the City Lord's mansion. This response was unbelievable. This should be considered normal. After all, Silverwing City is currently the only guild city in the Orc Empire. With that transportation firm here, high player traffic is guaranteed. These cunning merchant players and NPCs definitely won't let this opportunity get away. The only question now is, how many shops and lands is Silverwing willing to rent out? Mushin said, her expression remaining unfazed as she took in the long queue before her. In fact, after seeing what Silverwing City had to offer, Mushin had already resolved to rent some of its lands and shops in preparation for her guild members' development in the city. Needless to say, merchant players and NPCs, who frequently traveled between large cities and possessed a keen sense for business, would definitely realize Silverwing City's potential and take action much more quickly than she had. The player merchants waiting outside the City Lord's mansion turned their heads automatically toward Mushin's group, surprise flashing across their eyes when they recognized the group. What? Frost Heaven is actually planning to partner with Silverwing? If that's the case, Silverwing will really rise on the eastern continent. Indeed, Frost Heaven has 3 international corporations backing it. Even if Silverwing receives only a small amount of support from Frost Heaven, it would no longer have to worry about funding and resources. It seems the various superpowers will have to fear Silverwing in the future. After all, previously Silverwing was already close to rivaling ordinary superpowers in terms of experts and guild foundations. If Silverwing receives Frost Heaven's support and resources, it would basically be a superpower already. By this time, even ordinary players were familiar with the superpower known as Frost Heaven. After all, the guild had not only successfully dominated multiple kingdoms, but also claimed a corner of the Apocalypse Empire. In addition, Frost Heaven's name resounded in the ears of merchant players like themselves, what with 3 international corporations backing the guild. Even the eastern continent's up-and-coming Starlink and various super guilds had to show respect to Frost Heaven. Mushin's group walked into the City Lord's mansion under the watchful gazes of the merchant players outside. Inside the City Lord's mansion, aside from the personal guards on security duty, there were plenty of Silverwing experts training. The liveliness inside the mansion grounds was not the slightest bit inferior to the situation outside the mansion. Sure enough, the number and quality of Silverwing's experts are still considerably inferior to the various superpowers. The female cursemancer shook her head and sighed as she eyed her surroundings. With the standards of Silverwing's members, even if Mushin agrees to let Silverwing join the alliance, The other allied guilds will most likely object. Many of Zero Wing's Tier 2 members had reached level 115 already, with the Tier 3 members boasting even higher levels. These players were also very well equipped, with the weakest piece of equipment on the Tier 3 experts being level 110 Fine Gold rank. When it came to levels and equipment standards, Zero Wing's members did not lose out to the various superpowers. However, Zero Wing's members had one fatal flaw. Their average combat standard was very low, let alone Flowing Water Realm experts. Zero Wing barely had Refinement Realm experts. In this regard, Zero Wing was no match for the various superpowers at all. Hence, even though Zero Wing possessed a large number of powerful personal guards, it still couldn't be considered a superpower. After all, personal guards would remain a threat for only a certain period. Compared to players, NPCs had a much more difficult time developing themselves. The true way for a guild to grow strong was for it to have a large number of peak experts under its command. Although rumor had it that Zero Wing had several extraordinary experts, this small number simply wasn't enough for the guild to become a superpower, let alone get Mushin to agree to its joining Frost Heaven's alliance. During the time the female Cursemancer was entertaining such thoughts, Yulan had brought Mushin's group to the City Lord's mansion's first-floor reception room. "Please enter," Yulan said as she opened the doors for Mushin's group. After nodding in response to Yulan's words, Mushin entered the reception room together with her subordinates. The instant Mushin and the others entered the reception room, however, their bodies immediately felt heavier. They also sensed that they had lost control over the mana around them, and it seemed as if they had entered another world. A mana domain. The female Cursemancer gaped in shock at Shifeng, who was currently seated inside the room. How is this possible? At this moment, let alone the female Cursemancer, even the other members of the Frost Heaven contingent were stunned speechless by the current situation. As Tier 3 experts, they knew very clearly what a mana domain was. After all, this was something they occasionally encountered when raiding Tier 4 monsters. Not to mention, there were also Tier 3 skills and spells that allowed players to form a mana domain. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Mana domains fell into two types: active and passive. Active-type mana domains were formed using skills and spells, while passive-type mana domains were formed without the use of skills or spells. Of the two types, the latter was generally an ability only NPCs at Tier 4 or above could grasp. However, the mana domain currently enveloping them clearly wasn't formed with a skill or spell. Instead, it was a byproduct of Shifeng's circulation of his own mana. In other words, this was a passive-type mana domain. This type of mana domain was the main reason why Tier 4 NPCs were overwhelmingly stronger than Tier 3 NPCs. The moment this passive-type mana domain was activated, Tier 3 NPCs would be mere jokes in front of a Tier 4 NPC. Now, however, this ability that could normally be found only on Tier 4 NPCs had actually been mastered by a Tier 3 player. This was incredible. "You must be Frost Heaven's representatives. I am Zero Wing's guild leader, Black Flame," Shifeng said as he swept his gaze across Mushin's group. Going straight to the point, he asked, "I heard from Yulan that you've come to discuss a partnership with Zero Wing. May I know what kind of partnership you have in mind?" Chapter 2685 Generous Remuneration. Tier 4 Promotion Quest. As soon as Shifeng finished speaking, the female Cursemancer and the other Frost Heaven members inside the room promptly snapped out of their dazes. All the contempt they previously had for Zero Wing swept away. The number of peak experts Zero Wing currently had was indeed no match for the various superpowers. However, with Shifeng's mana domain, he could boost a team's combat power by a significant margin. Moreover, if a superpower did not have any means of dealing with a mana domain, it wouldn't matter how many Tier 3 experts they sent at Shifeng. Every one of them would just end up as cannon fodder. "Guild Leader Black Flame, you really are a straightforward person. In that case, let me introduce myself first. I am Mushin, a Vice Guild Leader of Frost Heaven, and I am here on behalf of the guild to invite Zero Wing to join Frost Heaven's alliance," Mushin said, looking at Shifeng. "Your alliance?" Shifeng looked at Mushin with some confusion. As far as he remembered, Frost Heaven had always walked the path of a lone wolf, never forming alliances with others. "That's right. You can consider it an alliance targeting the foe Saint monsters," Mushin explained, nodding. "So long as Zero Wing joins the alliance, Not only will we attack and defend against the foe Saint monsters together, but we will also share plenty of information with Silverwing, especially information related to the foe Saint monsters' activities. This way, if the foe Saint monsters try to conduct any large-scale operations, we will be prepared for them. What are the entry requirements? Silverwing asked. For the current Silverwing, the offer of help in attacking and defending against the foe Saint monsters wasn't particularly important. However, information regarding the foe Saint monsters' activities was something that interested him greatly. Although Silverwing's members could collect plenty of information regarding the foe Saint monsters' movements, the scope of that information would drastically pale in comparison to what several superpowers working together could obtain. With such information, he would have a better grasp of the foe Saint monsters' movements and could have Silverwing make preparations ahead of time. After all, the problem of the foe Saint monsters wasn't something that could be dealt with in the short term. In fact, these monsters would remain a big problem for Silverwing far into the future. Guild leader Black Flame, you're overthinking things. There are no conditions for joining the alliance, Mushin said, a faint smile appearing on her face. If I have to give one, then it is receiving Frost Heaven's recognition. Does that mean Silverwing has received this recognition already? Silverwing asked curiously. Of course. Moreover, aside from inviting Silverwing into the alliance, I also wish to extend an invitation to Silverwing to take part in a secret operation our alliance is planning, Mushin said earnestly. Secret operation? Is it compulsory to join? Silverwing asked when he noticed a hint of excitement on Mushin's face. It's not compulsory, but if Silverwing is willing to help, I can personally provide you with a generous remuneration. For example, I can give you 50 bottles of S-rank nutrient fluid, something that the various superpowers are currently in urgent need of, Mushin said. The other Frost Heaven members standing beside Mushin turned to her in shock. Mushin, what are you thinking? That's an absolute secret. Even within the alliance, only 2 other guilds have the qualifications to take part. If you invite Silverwing, even if the Grand Elders agree, the other 2 guilds will most likely have strong opinions about it. The female Cursemancer murmured to Mushin. The female Cursemancer wasn't particularly surprised that Mushin had agreed to Silverwing's joining the alliance. After all, with Silverwing City's benefits in Silverwing's mana domain, Silverwing indeed possessed the qualifications to do so. However, inviting Silverwing to participate in the alliance's secret operation was a completely different story. The secret operation Mushin referred to was extraordinary. Frost Heaven and the 2 other superpowers involved in this operation had paid an enormous price to secure this opportunity. Mushin was simply insane to invite Silverwing along. Relax. I'll just say that Silverwing's participation will be taken from my share. That way, the 2 other superpowers should not have any problems, Mushin replied nonchalantly. You have truly lost your mind. You asked for this. It's your problem if Uncle Hong and the others get angry at you, the female Cursemancer said in a huff. As the heiress of the Boulder Corporation, one of the 3 main corporations supporting Frost Heaven, Mushin indeed possessed a considerable number of participation slots for the upcoming operation. However, if Mushin gave these slots to Silverwing's members, Frost Heaven's guild leader and Grand Elders would definitely have opinions about it. In fact, if Silverwing's participation adversely affected the operation, the Boulder Corporation standing within Frost Heaven might even suffer. Meanwhile, seeing that the female Cursemancer had stopped speaking, Mushin returned her gaze to Silverwing. What do you think of this, guild leader Black Flame? Mushin asked once more. Will we receive the 50 bottles only if the operation succeeds? Silverwing asked after giving the matter some thought. He had a great yearning for S-rank nutrient fluids. Setting aside his own needs, he also needed plenty of S-rank nutrient fluids for the development of Silverwing's core upper echelon. Unlike the various superpowers, Silverwing did not have a major corporation backing it, so the guild had a much more difficult time obtaining S-rank nutrient fluids. He had to admit that Mushin had accurately grasped Silverwing's weakness. Of course not. The 50 bottles are a deposit. If the operation is a success, I will pay you an additional 50 bottles, Mushin replied, her smile widening at Silverwing's question. All right. I accept your invitation on behalf of Silverwing, Silverwing said. When he heard that the remuneration was 100 bottles of S-rank nutrient fluids, he agreed to the offer without hesitation. When will this secret operation take place? And how many players do I need to send? I can't give you an exact time yet, but judging by the current development, the operation will need a minimum of 11 or 12 days before it can start. As for the numbers, it's best if you bring no more than 10 players, Mushin replied after giving the matter some thought. She then pointed at the female cursemancer beside her and continued, once the preparations on our side are done, I'll have Li Xuan notify you. Very well. I will make all the necessary preparations beforehand, Shifeng said, nodding. After Shifeng agreed to Mushin's invitation, the two of them formally signed a contract. Before the start of the secret operation, Mushin would supply Silverwing with 50 bottles of S-rank nutrient fluid first. And so long as the operation was a success, Mushin would send another 50 bottles within 2 days of the operation's completion. Guild leader, do you really intend to take part in Frost Heaven's secret operation? Yulan asked worriedly after Mushin's group left the reception room. The fact that Frost Heaven is willing to offer 100 bottles of S-rank nutrient fluid as remuneration just goes to show how difficult this secret operation is. In fact, the operation might even come with great risks. If something untoward happens, Starlink and Saint's Hand will pounce on this opportunity. Now that Silverwing Town had been promoted into Silverwing City, the number of players and powers operating in Silverwing City was continuously increasing. According to their current estimates, they could easily make over 300,000 gold per day from the entrance fees alone. After deducting the various expenditures of the city, they should still net over 100,000 gold. And this didn't even take into account the income from the transportation firm. To put it simply, they had no need to take any risks. They were more than capable of amassing enough money to purchase a large amount of S-rank nutrient fluids, given some time. I understand, but we'll also need to live long enough to make that kind of money, Shifeng replied with a bitter smile. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. If possible, he would prefer to refuse Mushin's offer as well. After all, S-rank nutrient fluids were not common goods that were readily available. Even for Frost Heaven, S-rank nutrient fluids were an extremely precious resource. The fact that Mushin was willing to pay such a hefty price for Silverwings meant that the secret operation in question was incredibly difficult. However, 100 bottles of S-rank nutrient fluid would alleviate a significant portion of the pressure on Silverwing. Not to mention, now that his identity had been exposed, purchasing S-rank nutrient fluids would become even more problematic than before. After Shifeng finished conversing with Yulan and had assigned all the necessary work in Silverwing City, he stealthily made his way to the core room located on the City Lord's mansion's second underground floor. He then took out a tattered scroll from his bag. Although I haven't made all possible preparations, in order to ensure the success of my future operations, I have no choice but to get promoted as soon as possible. Gritting his teeth, Shifeng unfurled the legacy scroll he obtained from the ancient Lich Zorak and chanted the incantation recorded on it. Chapter 2686, Legacy Land? As Shifeng chanted the incantation recorded on the legacy scroll, the divine runes on the legacy scroll started releasing an array of colorful lights that brightly illuminated the dimly lit core room. Following which, the divine runes detached from the legacy scroll and linked up into a ring before Shifeng. A short moment later, an incomparably dark vortex appeared within this ring of runes. The black vortex was 3 meters tall. Just its existence alone thinned out the mana within the core room considerably. The vortex was like an insatiable beast that devoured everything. Just how harsh is the environment in the Legacy Land? Shifeng was astonished when he sensed the incomparably thin mana around him. Originally, he had planned to challenge his Tier 4 promotion quest only after he had broken through the limits of his epic mana body. That way, he would have a much greater chance of success. After all, unlike the promotion quest for lower tiers, the Tier 4 promotion quest did not have any difficulty options for players to choose from. How much improvement they gained from their Tier 4 promotion quest depended entirely on how much progress they made in the Legacy Land. Of course, there were also some differences between Legacy Lands. Naturally, the harsher the environment at a Legacy Land, the more difficult it would be for players to obtain their Tier 4 legacy. However, searching for Tier 4 Legacy Lands was arduous. In fact, when challenging the Tier 4 promotion quest, Players generally spent 90% of their time searching for a legacy land. In short, players would be very fortunate to come across a legacy land. They didn't have the luxury to choose between different legacy lands. Hence, luck played a considerably important role when challenging the Tier 4 promotion quest. With luck, one would find a good legacy land and have an easier time obtaining the Tier 4 legacy. Without it, one would find a legacy land with an extremely harsh environment and might suffer failure as soon as they set foot into the legacy land. This was a situation Shifeng had faced before. After all, he had failed plenty of times at his Tier 4 promotion quest in his past life. Currently, although he couldn't determine what kind of legacy land the teleportation portal before him led to, judging by how the portal had devoured almost all of the core room's mana, he could tell that this legacy land had incredibly thin ambient mana. In fact, the ambient mana density in the legacy land should be even lower than that of the core room at the moment. However, before Shifeng could continue his observation, a series of system notifications entered his ears. System: you have opened the legacy land's portal. Please enter the portal within 3 minutes, or the portal will automatically close. System: you have activated the promotion quest for the Tier 4 Blade Saint. Quest content: enter the legacy land and obtain the ancient legacy's power. Rewards unknown. System: once you enter the legacy land, you will be prohibited from having any contact with the outside world. If you die within the legacy land, you will be teleported out of the legacy land, your levels will be reduced by 5, and your soul will be weakened for 3 days. Please consider your decision carefully. 5 levels? This legacy land is truly vicious. Shifeng frowned reflexively when he heard the contents of the system notifications. Normally, dying in a Tier 4 legacy land would result in a loss of only 2 or 3 levels. The penalty for this one, however, was actually 5 levels. This was definitely the legacy land with the highest penalty he had ever heard of. However, Shifeng did not hesitate for long before walking straight into the black vortex. If possible, he did not wish to enter such a harsh legacy land either. However, if he didn't enter, he would be deemed to have failed his Tier 4 promotion quest. If that happened, he would have to wait a considerable period before he could challenge his Tier 4 promotion quest again, an outcome he definitely didn't want. After all, aside from Frost Heaven's upcoming secret operation, the Divine Dragon's trial also awaited him. If he gave up on entering his legacy land now, he would have to face the Divine Dragon's trial with only a Tier 3 body, basically setting himself up for failure. Hence, he had no other choice but to grit his teeth and take on this legacy land. Fortunately, the Epic Legacy Scroll granted him 3 re-challenge attempts, 2 more than what the Dark Gold Legacy Scroll provided. Having a total of 4 challenge attempts increased his chances of success significantly. As soon as Shifeng stepped into the black vortex, darkness enveloped his vision. At the same time, his body seemed to spin freely in empty space. By the time his vision recovered, the scenery before him had changed completely. Currently, he was free-falling. Moreover, not only was the sky dark, but spatial tears also filled the air around him. It was as if the world he had just arrived in was crumbling. There was no ground beneath him either. All he could see below was a bottomless abyss. To make matters worse, the mana was practically non-existent. Shifeng was momentarily stunned by this situation. He had been to many legacy lands, but this was his first time visiting such a harsh legacy land. In fact, rather than a legacy land, this location looked more like a world teetering on the brink of destruction instead. If not for his epic mana body, he would have long since lost consciousness due to the extremely thin ambient mana here. Not daring to be careless, Shifeng promptly activated Gale Domain to put some distance between himself and the bottomless abyss below. However, shortly after he started flying, a powerful suction force came from the bottomless abyss, which made his body feel incomparably heavy. Is long-term flight prohibited here? Looking at the bottomless abyss that was pulling him down, Shifeng faintly understood the rules of this legacy land. He immediately headed for the nearest cliff. 400 yards. 300 yards. 200 yards. The longer Shifeng remained in flight, the stronger the gravity acting on his body grew. Initially, the gravity was only twice as strong as usual. Eventually, though, it increased to more than tenfold. Moreover, it continued increasing by twofold every second. Not only did this situation cause his flying speed to decrease continuously, but it also made controlling his body increasingly difficult. Faster. I need to be faster. When the gravity approached unbearable levels, Shifeng desperately tried to reach the cliff beside the abyss. When less than 20 yards separated him from the cliff, his ability to fly suddenly got neutralized. As a result, he plummeted toward the bottomless abyss like a meteor. To make matters worse, the gravity acting on his body still kept increasing, which in turn accelerated his speed of descent. This won't do. At this rate, I'll die from the wind pressure before I even hit the ground. After free-falling for a dozen seconds, Shifeng already found the increasing wind pressure pushing against his body unbearable. At this rate, he would most likely die after another few dozen seconds of free fall. He took out a bunch of advanced frost grenades from his bag and detonated them on his back. Boom, boom, boom. Along with the sounds of explosions, a series of ice flowers appeared in midair. Although Shifeng ended up losing over 20% of his HP and got himself covered in a layer of frost from the frost grenades, the impact of the explosions propelled his body a lot closer to the nearby cliff. However, despite the distance to the cliff narrowing, his complexion remained grim. After all, if he collided with the cliff at his current speed, he was still unlikely to survive. In the next moment, the armor Shifeng wore also started turning red-hot. Just as he was about to crash into the cliff like a blazing meteor, he activated Heavenly Dragon's power, instantly increasing his basic attributes, defense, and HP by a significant margin. He then unsheathed the abyssal blade and stabbed it into the cliff. Boom! After getting stabbed into the cliff wall, the abyssal blade tore the rocky surface as Shifeng continued sliding down. At the same time, his HP also started depleting rapidly. 75%, 60%, 30%. Fortunately, his body finally came to a grinding halt with his HP just below 500,000. After pulling himself out of the clutches of death, he breathed out a deep sigh of relief. If not for Heavenly Dragon's power, he really would have died just now. Is this really a legacy land? Confusion filled Shifeng's heart as he gazed at the bottomless abyss beneath him. Although legacy lands weren't known for their friendly environments, none of them had such a harsh environment either. Currently, he couldn't see any signs of life in this legacy land, let alone monsters. Aside from the bottomless abyss, the only other thing within sight were the cliffs surrounding it. He couldn't find any traces of an ancient legacy at all. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. However, as Shifeng was trying to figure out what he needed to do in this legacy land, several thunderous roars came from the bottomless abyss. A short moment later, gigantic figures emerged from the abyss. And upon seeing these figures, Shifeng could not help being dumbfounded. How is this possible? Shifeng's eyes widened with astonishment as he gaped at these gigantic figures. After all, these figures belonged to the rarely seen dragon race. Meanwhile, these dragons had clearly discovered his presence already. Chapter 2687, Infant Black Dragons. Before Shifeng could snap out of his daze, the 3 black dragons with 60-meter wingspans flapped their wings and transformed into a blur as they flew straight at him. Infant Black Dragon. Dragon, Great Lord. Level 122 HP 4, 200, 00000/4, 200, 0000000. Crap! Shifeng cursed out loud when he saw the 3 infant black dragons zooming toward him. Although his opponents were merely Tier 3 infant dragons, as creatures belonging to the apex race in God's domain, they were still far stronger than ordinary Tier 4 mythic monsters. Not to mention there were 3 of them. With the power these infant dragons wielded, they could easily destroy the current Silverwing city. They simply weren't existences individual Tier 3 players could hope to go up against. In fact, even Tier 4 players would have to take the long way around if they came across a force of 3 Tier 3 infant dragons. To make matters worse, not only was Shifeng currently stuck to a cliff, but an incredibly powerful gravitational force was also dragging on his body. Despite having Heavenly Dragon's power activated right now, he couldn't move his body normally. Clashing with these infant black dragons would simply guarantee an early death. He immediately unsheathed Killing Ray and stabbed it into the cliff wall as well. He then started climbing up the cliff with all his might using his 2 swords. However, the gravitational pull from the abyss was simply too powerful, and Silverwing could not climb quickly, even if he wanted to. In the end, before he could climb 20 yards, one of the infant dragons had already arrived before him and sent its massive claw smashing at him. The speed of the claw was also so fast that his only option was to receive it. Scram! Silverwing bellowed as he swung the abyssal blade at the claw. The power the magic weapon carried so great that it even tore through space itself. When the abyssal blade came into contact with the infant dragon's claw, not only did the magic weapon repel the gigantic claw, but the force of the blow even pushed the infant dragon backward by more than 10 yards. This result shocked the infant dragon, and its golden eyes gazed at Silverwing in astonishment. As a member of the apex race that represented destruction, it had actually lost to a lower existence of the same tier in a direct confrontation. Normally, something like this should be impossible, yet this impossible feat had actually occurred just now. However, despite having repelled the infant dragon's attack, Silverwing did not show any signs of excitement at all. Due to the strength boost provided by the heavenly dragon's power and the dragon's domination passive skill, his strength indeed surpassed that of a level 122 infant black dragon. However, as he was currently stuck on the side of a cliff, the only thing he could do was passively defend against the infant dragon's attacks. He couldn't launch any counterattacks or run away. Meanwhile, heavenly dragon's power had a very limited duration. Once he lost the strength buff from the berserk skill, he would have a much harder time coping with the infant dragon's attacks. Roar! As the repelled infant dragon roared angrily, another infant dragon appeared beside Silverwing and attacked him. While Silverwing had his hands full with the second infant dragon's attack, the first infant dragon, which had gotten repelled, actually opened its mouth and used dragon breath on him. Even with his current basic attributes, Silverwing did not dare take on the dragon breath of a true dragon. Gritting his teeth, he yanked Killing Ray out of the cliff and let the gravity drag himself down. When produced by a true dragon, a Tier 3 dragon breath carried enough power to rival even ordinary attacks at the peak Tier 4 standard. Moreover, dragon breath was an AoE attack, so defending against it with normal attacks was impossible. Although Silverwing had the option of using his mana technique, with how thin the ambient mana was in this legacy land, by the time he gathered enough mana to execute Light Shadow, he would have already been burned up by the infant dragon's dragon breath. Boom! In the next moment, a black beam struck at the spot where Silverwing was originally hanging and bored a hole into the cliff. As for Silverwing, after dodging the attack, he quickly stabilized himself further down the cliff. As expected of a true dragon breath, I probably get pushed back even if I used Light Shadow against it. Silverwing could not help his astonishment as he gazed at the massive hole that had appeared some distance above him. With just one attack, the infant black dragon had carved a hole with a 30-yard radius into the sturdy cliff. Silverwing, on the other hand, was just barely able to stab his swords into the cliff, even with the boost from Heavenly Dragon's power. Without the berserk skill's help, he would be able to stab only half their length into the cliff at best. However, before Silverwing could fully appreciate the infant black dragon's Tier 3 dragon breath, the 2 other infant dragons used their dragon breaths on him as well. Roar! 2 black beams instantly shot at Silverwing, the range they covered making it utterly impossible for him to avoid them. Seeing this, Silverwing instinctively activated Absolute Defense to block the 2 dragon breaths. However, because the cliff he was clinging to got vaporized, he lost his foothold and started plummeting toward the bottomless abyss once more. Seems it's over. Silverwing could not help a bitter smile when he looked at the bottomless abyss beneath him, then the 3 infant black dragons chasing after him. Not only was there a bottomless abyss that exerted an insane gravitational pull on him, but there were even 3 infant black dragons roaming the area. The difficulty of this legacy land was simply unheard of. He couldn't even keep himself alive for more than a few minutes in this legacy land, much less search for the ancient legacy hidden here. In other words, this legacy land was basically made to toy with players seeking to challenge their Tier 4 promotion quest. However, just as Silverwing was mentally preparing himself to give up on his Tier 4 promotion quest, several gleaming lights suddenly appeared on the pitch-black cliff. The lights carried a faint hint of divine might that made his soul shudder involuntarily. The ancient legacy fragments? Shock and excitement flashed in Shifeng's eyes when he looked at the fading lights. Just now, he'd concluded that this legacy land was a prank on players. However, it now looked like that was not the case at all. Although the gleaming lights coming from the cliff had soon vanished from sight due to his rapid descent, he was certain he had sensed divine might coming from those lights. The Tier 4 promotion quest was basically a quest for players to enter a legacy land and obtain as much of their legacy's power as possible. Normal classes generally needed to accumulate 70% of their legacy's power to reach Tier 4, while peak classes needed roughly 85%. He had seen quite a few streaks of light on the cliff, which meant that there should be a considerable number of legacy fragments there. If he could reach that location, he might be able to obtain enough legacy power to complete his promotion quest. After reaching this conclusion, Shifeng abandoned the idea of giving up on this legacy land. Locating the legacy fragments hidden within a legacy land was generally incredibly difficult and time-consuming. Now that he knew where they were, he naturally couldn't give up without trying. However, despite his change of mind, thinking back to the 3 infant black dragons gave him a huge headache. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. It might have been fine if his opponents were any other Great Lord-ranked monsters. In fact, even if he had to go up against 3 Tier 4 mythic monsters simultaneously, he was confident he could collect the legacy fragments while keeping himself alive. However, going up against 3 Tier 3 dragons simultaneously was simply too much. In fact, 1 infant black dragon would most likely be more than enough to whittle him to death within a short time. After all, the gravitational pull the abyss exerted was simply too powerful. While subjected to this gravitational pull, he couldn't bring out even half of his strength. At the same time, he didn't have any footholds he could shift to, which made dodging and blocking the infant dragon's attacks extraordinarily difficult. No, that's not right. So long as I can create a sufficient number of footholds, it might be possible to go up against 3 infant black dragons simultaneously with the dragon's domination's effects. While free-falling down the cliff, Shifeng suddenly recalled the gigantic holes the infant black dragons created. If he could carve out a sufficiently spacious path into the cliff, then defending himself against the 3 infant dragons wouldn't be an impossible dream. After thinking up to this point, he no longer waited for the abyss's gravitational pull to kill him. Instead, he took out the epic legacy scroll from his bag and activated it, starting another challenge for this legacy land. Chapter 2688. Legacy Land's true purpose. As soon as Shifeng activated the legacy scroll, darkness enveloped his vision once more, and the world seemed to spin around him. Everything was just like how he first walked into the dark vortex in the core room. The legacy scroll was a treasure highly sought after by the various superpowers, something they were willing to trade even fragmented legendary items for. And it was so coveted because it allowed players to re-challenge the same legacy land. While this function might not seem like much, it was heaven sent for players challenging their Tier 4 promotion quest. Normally, players had only one opportunity to challenge a legacy land. So long as they died, they would be teleported out of the legacy land, and the portal to the legacy land would disappear and reappear in another random location. Even if players found another legacy land portal later on, the chances of that portal leading to the same legacy land were abysmally low. Hence, it was almost impossible to challenge the same legacy land twice, which in turn made it impossible to learn from experience. For players, the difference between having a lot of experience when challenging a legacy land and challenging it cold was massive. Their chances of successfully clearing their Tier 4 promotion quest would skyrocket if they had foreknowledge of their legacy land. Hence, the various superpowers in the past had been willing to go as far as exchanging fragmented legendary items for legacy scrolls. In the eyes of ordinary players, this transaction would seem somewhat stupid. In reality, however, the difference between Tier 3 and Tier 4 was like the difference between life in the mud and in the clouds. Moreover, as players reached higher levels, the disparity in strength would only widen. After all, the opportunities Tier 3 and Tier 4 players could encounter and secure during the later stages of the game were completely different. Moreover, there was the difference in the amount of basic attributes Tier 3 and Tier 4 players gained whenever they leveled up. Meanwhile, after a short moment in the darkness, Shifeng reappeared in the sky above his first legacy land. And like before, his body started free-falling toward the bottomless abyss below him. Moreover, the cooldown of all of his skills and spells had been refreshed, the current situation making it seem as if he had gone back in time. Good. A quick check found that even the additional skills of his weapons and equipment had been refreshed. He immediately activated Gale Domain and flew straight to the nearest cliff. Previously, he had wasted a lot of time observing the Legacy Land. As a result, by the time he activated Gale Domain, the gravitational force acting on his body had already increased considerably, which had, in turn, reduced his speed and maneuverability by a significant margin. This time, though, as he had activated Gale Domain almost as soon as he arrived in the Legacy Land, he was able to fly at nearly double the speed he had before. In the end, he managed to reach the nearest cliff in just 15 seconds, with a lot of flight time remaining. Break. After arriving before the cliff, Shifeng immediately executed Light Shadow at it. Boom! An explosion rang out as rubble went flying. However, to Shifeng's surprise, the Phantom Greatsword had only managed to carve out a single tear the size of a human adult, barely enough for one person to stand in. Light Shadow's power was actually reduced this much? Shifeng frowned at the tear in the cliff. The power of Light Shadow was much weaker than he expected. He had given his all in that attack, yet it had barely reached the intermediate rank Tier 4 standard. Had he used such an attack against the infant Black Dragon's Dragon Breath, he definitely would have ended up dead. However, Shifeng did not dare to waste time. Quickly, he executed Light Shadow against the cliff once more. By the 8th time he executed Light Shadow, Gale Domain finally expired. Fortunately, he had managed to carve out an adequate foothold for himself. With this foothold, he should have enough space to dodge and block the infant Black Dragon's attacks. However, when Shifeng gazed down at the bottomless abyss, he could not help massaging his temple. Although his current situation was much better than before, he still had massive problems to deal with. Setting aside the 3 infant dragons, just the fact that he needed to carve a path down the cliff was already a huge problem. Each use of Light Shadow only allowed him to carve out a small hole fit for one person to stand in. The hole was also only 1 meter deep. However, by his estimates, he needed to descend several kilometers to reach the area where he had seen the legacy fragments. In that case, he wouldn't be able to reach the legacy fragments, even after executing Light Shadow for a month. Although he could increase the destructive power of his attacks by using Berserk skills were meant to save his life. They should not be used unless absolutely necessary, especially in this godforsaken Legacy Land. There were simply too many unknown dangers here. If he used up his Berserk skills too quickly, he would definitely die when a truly dangerous situation popped up. It seems I have to find a way to increase the power of my attacks. After giving the matter some thought, Shifeng concluded that this was his only option. Using summoning tools was impossible while inside a Legacy Land. Players weren't allowed to summon their personal guards here. In such a situation, the only way he could reach the legacy fragments as quickly as possible was to raise the raw power of his attacks. However, such a feat was easier said than done. The mana technique Light Shadow was currently the strongest move in his repertoire. Even bronze combat techniques could not hold a candle to it. However, if he simply relied on Light Shadow to carve a path down, he wouldn't reach the legacy fragments even if he tired himself to death. He needed a qualitative improvement to his raw power. If I wish to increase the power of my attacks, aside from breaking through the limits of my mana body, the only other option is to improve my mana technique. Without any inspirations, trying to break through the mana body's perfect state is utterly impossible. In that case, I have no choice but to try to master the second sword, Holy Devour. As Shifeng sensed the mana surrounding him, an idea struck him. Although the environment here is extremely harsh and the density of the mana here is close to 0, my brain doesn't feel any discomfort. The environment here is roughly similar to that inside the Legacy Gate. Could the environment here be created for the purpose of helping players learn mana techniques? Having thought up to this point, Shifeng felt that there was a high possibility of his guess being correct. Legacy lands were termed as such because they provided guidance to their challengers. They weren't created to extinguish all life. Meanwhile, in low-mana environments, players would have an easier time not only sensing the mana flowing within their mana bodies, but also training in mana techniques. This was because the ability to control one's mana played an important role in executing a mana technique. And in a low-mana environment, players wouldn't have to deal with as much interference from the ambient mana as they normally would, which, in turn, allowed them to perceive and control their mana better. Moreover, it was important for players seeking to get promoted to Tier 4 to possess an adequate degree of mana control, aside from fully unlocking their mana bodies. After all, the birth of a mana domain relied heavily on a player's ability to control mana. Shifeng unsheathed the Abyssal Blade and started trying to execute the second sword, Holy Devour. The most important point to take note of when executing Light Shadow was the shaping of mana. The complexity of the technique involved in doing so could inspire despair even in peak experts. Only Domain Realm experts that had developed their mana control to a certain extent could execute Light Shadow. Holy Devour, on the other hand, required its user to materialize mana. Without sufficient understanding of the operating principle and structure of mana, executing Holy Devour would be utterly impossible. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Previously, Shifeng had not held much hope of learning how to execute Holy Devour while he was still at Tier 3. After all, the degree of perception and control of mana required to execute the technique reached in human levels. However, due to the Faux Saint Devourer's soul marks, his perception of mana had undergone a qualitative transformation. In the next moment, Shifeng shut his eyes and lightly raised the Abyssal Blade with both hands. He then manipulated his mana domain to start gathering as much mana as possible around the Abyssal Blade. After draining all the ambient mana, Shifeng abruptly opened his eyes and swung the Abyssal Blade at the cliff wall before him. Holy Devour! You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Sword of Destiny YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.